This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, John Tucker in for Lisa Mateo. Lisa Mateo on assignment.
What are you moaning for over there?
Corner of Hollywood and Vine.
No
and,
Lisa
it's
Mateo.
going to be interesting. Tucker, we will do newspapers. We just had an executive meeting with our senior management, and we can do it without Lisa.
Yeah, we'll try. We'll try it.
Probably
See
it'll
how it
be,
goes.
Tucker will probably, it'll all be congestion stories.
Is she at the Hollywood Hotel or something? Is she just hobnobbing?
She's at Hollywood and Vine. It's
Okay.
a great program that Bloomberg does with Hispanic broadcasters, with the leadership of Caroline Gage of Bloomberg News. And they,
Very good.
when you got to travel, you roll with Lisa Mateo. That's where she is, out on the left coast. Some of our people are out at Green. Carol Masters in Seattle.
Exactly.
The Bloomberg Green Festival with
Yep.
some really important guests there.
Yep.
Timely to say. At least, of course, Amazon and Microsoft ascended in these markets. And, we get some economic data today, but the big layup is tomorrow. CPI and PPI into Friday. Huge data points, Paul, Thursday and Friday.
Exactly, huge data points. We heard from Fed Chairman Jay Powell yesterday in front of the Senate. He'll be in front of the House today. We'll bring that to you in 10 a.m., Tom. But he seemed to suggest that he has some concerns about this labor market. And that kind of, I think, got a lot of market participants thinking about, rate cuts are on the table here.
China with some disinflation. And they get this. Where did this hawkish, dovish tilt stuff come in?
Yeah.
Can we blame Gargi Chaudhuri for that?
Yeah, I think we can.
Dovish tilt.
BlackRock.
The Bank of New Zealand, Royal Bank of New Zealand,
Yep.
with either a hawkish or dovish tilt. I know it's too hot out for me to worry about that. Red and green on the screen right now. The VIX 12.44, really stasis. But in the currency market, some really interesting stuff going on. Elsa Lingos will be with us for Global Wall Street here in about 10 minutes. We're in the Interactive Broker Studios with our Bloomberg Business Flash, John Tucker.
All right. Well, stocks did close at all-time highs yesterday with Jerome Powell's remarks to Congress, to senators, doing little to alter bets that the Federal Reserve is going to be able to cut interest rates this year. S&P 500 did hit its 36th record this year. And futures this morning, they point to maybe a slightly higher open. Dow futures up 4 points. S&P E-mini futures right now 8 points higher. That's up about 0.1%. The NASDAQ futures right now 53 points higher. As far as yields, the 2-year 1 basis point lower. That's at 4.61. The 10-year is 2 basis points lower. That is at 4.27. Some deal news. Honeywell International agreeing to buy Air Products and Chemicals, liquefied natural gas process technology and equipment business. $1.81 billion in cash, at least that's according to the Wall Street Journal. Most active pre-market, number one, NVIDIA right now up 0.8%. Tesla shares, they're up 0.1%, and Intel shares, they are up about 0.1%. And Elon Musk chalking up another win, defeating that $500 million severance lawsuit over the firing of 6,000 Twitter employees after his 2022 takeover. Let me check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. Paul, I'm stressed out by why don't you bring in our guest here? I mean, Gargi came in today just to, hang, and, she's with BlackRock, and it's an important conversation.
Gargi Chaudhuri, Chief Investment and Portfolio Strategist of the Americas for BlackRock, but more important than that, she was at Merrill Lynch. She was at Jefferies, a company. But she's one of these people, Tom, that runs marathons, ultra marathons.
Yeah,
I mean, who does that stuff? Where are they running to? Who are they running from? I don't get it all.
I see her in Central Park.
Exactly. Gargi, thanks so much for joining us here in our studio. As John Tucker was just reporting here, all-time highs again yesterday for these markets. How do you think about just the opportunities in markets as you think about strategy, stepping back and looking about stocks, bonds, alternatives, treasuries? I've got the Federal Reserve. I've got earnings starting this week. Where do you guys start at a 30,000 foot level?
Sure. Good morning. It's great to be here. Lovely studios. So I will answer that question with the comment that you made about marathon running. It's all about the long run, and staying in the markets with a diversified portfolio is the way in which we're thinking about investing right now. We just came out with our mid-year outlook yesterday, our mid-year investment directions. And one of the things that we talk about there is that despite the very strong rally that we've seen so far year to date in the equity markets, especially in the US, we certainly think there continues to be pockets of opportunity, and we think investors should be focused on that quality parts of the equity markets and the core of your portfolio. What does quality mean? Profitability, low leverage, and really stable earnings growth. And obviously we see that in some of those tech and tech adjacent centers. Looking over to fixed income, income is king, and you can really get very robust, 6 to 7% income in a variety of sources. So that's really the 30,000 foot view. And I'd also say that investors are really looking for diversification right now.
It reads like a Davos manifest here. What in God's name is a fundamental transformation? You got to be kidding me. Did you come up with that? Is that a marketing thing? One of your interns?
Well, what we mean by fundamental transformation is that there are a few things, as we were just talking about when we looked at what are the stocks that are trading the most in the morning. And there are some companies that are driving changes that we think will be here, driving inflation, driving growth, driving returns, driving profit margins, driving productivity for a long time. And one of them is related to AI. And we spend a lot of time talking about the long-term opportunities, both with AI in terms of semiconductors, but also in the power needs of AI.
So how do you respond? I don't mean to interrupt, but this is what everybody on Global Wall Street wants to know. I'm going to suggest BlackRock is a more conservative, passive, a little bit of active buy-side shop. Goldman Sachs is a sell-side shop, and they're going to generate an opinion. Mm-hmm. Somebody at Goldman Sachs in the last 48 hours, his basic, may I editorialize, Paul? Sure. AI is BS. Oh. How do you respond to that? They say there's no provable, identifiable downstream success with AI. How does BlackRock respond to that?
So one of the things that I would say is right now, when we look at the things that AI can do, whether that's just making your PowerPoint deck or whether that's in healthcare and looking at your mammogram results, this is just the beginning. We didn't know about ChatGPT, and there was no LLM, it was there, but it wasn't being as used 3 or 4 years ago. This is the beginning. In 1990, no one was using the internet. Today, 90% of the world's on the internet. This is just the beginning of what AI will do, not just in semiconductors, but across the stack, whether that be in financials, whether that be in healthcare, whether that be obviously in technology. So obviously people can have their opinions, and I think it's great to have two-sided markets. I think that's what makes a buyer and a seller. We like that. We encourage that. And but at the same time, we definitely think that there are some major, as we call them, structural transformations, of which AI is one. Demographics is another one, and we talk a little bit about the opportunities in India as a result of that. Geopolitics is another one that we spend a little bit of time talking about as well. And obviously, one of the things that I started off by talking about was the need for income as a result of some of these demographic shifts.
INDA, the iShares MSCI India ETF.
Yes.
Give us the India call. I think I understand it from the super macro level. It's the last 20, 25 years of China, maybe the next 20, 25 years will be India. That's as far as I go. How do you guys approach it?
It's not just about being the next China, and I actually would want investors to move away from that thinking. Okay. I think it's really about a country that is doing 3 things right now, which makes it appealing to investors. Number one, of course, the young demographic population. You have a country of people where majority are between that age of 25 and 45, which, especially when you look at the developed markets, is not the case. Second, it's the growth of infrastructure. It's what the government is putting in for infrastructure right now to make the country more productive and enhance productivity. Third is that Indian equities for either US investors or actually more importantly, Indian investors are really underowned. So there is the shift that's going to happen over the next few years and decades even, where more and more investors are going to go into their own domestic market. So I think all of that leads to both a short and a long-term story that we really like. And investors have been pouring into INDA this year.
Come back. This has been good.
Okay.
Please come back. We'd love to have you in as we can. Gargi Chaudhuri with us with BlackRock today. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. On the data front, folks, it's simple. Red and green on the screen. But as Paul mentioned, there is a lift to the market. NASDAQ up 0.3%. It's just amazing day after day. Waiting in on CPI tomorrow. How there? I don't know. I don't think the cliche "there's a bid to the market" works. It's just it won't go down.
It won't go down.
I don't know. You know, it's very. I'm trying to impress Gargi with my math.
Exactly.
It won't go down.
I'm looking at European equities. I mean, stock 600 up at 0.6%. The DAX up 0.7%. The CAC up 0.8%. So it's not just the U.S.
In honor of Ken Pruitt yesterday, he and I used to fight. We had a fist fight once over this. He would always quote the CAC 40, and I'm like, Ken, nobody cares. And he goes, when I was at CBS years ago, we quoted the CAC 40 like religion.
Yep.
I'm like, Ken, nobody cares. Except now we care.
Now we care.
Because of the French election. It's going to be interesting to see. We'll do fixed income for you here in a moment. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, and John. President Joe Biden hosting the NATO summit in Washington touted the shield they've all provided for democracy for 75 years. Biden also said this is why Ukraine needs help in ousting Russian invaders.
This is a pivotal moment for Europe, for the transatlantic community, and I might add for the world. Let's remember, the fact that NATO remains the bulwark of global security did not happen by accident.
Meanwhile, Biden is trying to rally support within his own party behind his candidacy, with his mental acuity being questioned. Former President Donald Trump held an event at his resort, Trump National Doral Golf Club in Miami, Florida. He was joined by potential running mate Marco Rubio. During his speech, Trump spoke on his debate performance compared to that of President Biden and says he's ready for another debate.
We're so absolute that Joe's own party now wants him to throw in the towel and surrender the presidency after a single 90-minute performance. They want Crooked Joe out of the race. It's a shame the way they're treating him.
Trump says he wants to do the next debate without moderators. An Israeli airstrike on a school-turned-shelter in southern Gaza has killed at least 25 Palestinians. Heavy bombardment in the north, meanwhile, forced the closure of medical facilities in Gaza City and sent thousands fleeing in search of increasingly elusive refuge. Israel's new ground assault in Gaza's largest city is its latest effort to battle Hamas militants. In Texas, close to 2 million homes and businesses are still without power after barrel struck. In Gregg County, multiple food pantries in the area were closed due to power outages. Families turned to the Salvation Army even without power themselves. Employees say they want to provide many families with food.
Walk through those doors and come get some food. We're more than willing to do anything to help anybody right now.
Right now, there's also a cooling and charging station at the Longview Exhibit Center. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it. With the Bloomberg News Now, I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, John.
Michael Barr, thank you so much. We're efforting Surveillance Europe on $5 a day correspondent Charles Pell to get an Olympic update. But, I'm loving this live chat on YouTube. We're on YouTube. Search, subscribe, Bloomberg Podcast. Yep. And Paul, this guy's at the Qinghai Tibetan Plateau.
Uh-oh. And he's listening to Bloomberg
He's
Surveillance.
on Apple CarPlay or something. I don't know. Good morning out on YouTube from the Tibetan Plateau. Have you been there?
I have not. I'd love to go, but
you fly into Lasha, Lost Horizon, and then you can take the train as well. Or you can go, I love this. This sounds like what Tucker would do. Overland from Kathmandu to Lasha. Good morning, Tibet. Yeah, thrilled. I've never said that in all these years. Good morning, Tibet. Thrilled that you're listening there on YouTube. From New York City, big day, Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker, the newsroom, with a look at some of the stories we're following this morning. Stocks setting to advance for a seventh straight session. Looking ahead to the second day of testimony from Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Microsoft and Apple dropping plans to take board seats at OpenAI, a surprise decision. It underscores growing regulatory scrutiny of the big tech influence over AI. Some of the stock's most active pre-market shares of NVIDIA right now, they are up 1.2%. And you also have some other movers pre-market. LegalZoom, those shares down as much as 30%. The legal services company cutting its full-year revenue guidance to below consensus estimates. Also naming a new CEO. Walmart shares, they're higher after Piper Sandler assumed coverage on the retailer with an overweight recommendation. They note that it's in the early stages of an unprecedented profit growth acceleration for a large and mature retailer. Dow futures down 8 right now. S&P E-mini futures up 8. The NASDAQ futures up 59 points. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul, Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. You know, what did the East German judge give him? I mean, Tucker compared to Lisa Mateo.
I think he's doing fine.
It's like a 7 point. It's a 7-3.
I hope it's really, really hot in Hollywood.
Yes.
And raining.
And then I think it is too. Although she's close to Mel's Diner, which is all that matters. We'll talk about that in a bit. For Global Wall Street, this is a treat. She is absolutely definitive. Her deck is 20 pages. It is coveted out of Brussels, out of London. Elsa Lingos with RBC Capital Markets. We protect the copyright of our guests. Get her wonderful, wonderful deck only at RBC. Elsa, thank you so much for the time. I'm going to go right to the Chinese yuan page, and I love what you and George Davis talk about. An effective controlled depreciation is underway. This is what it's about in the world of Damien Sassower in Asia, that we're depreciating Philippine peso, we're depreciating Chinese yuan, we're depreciating this, that, and the other, whether we like it or not?
Yeah, I mean, it's been the policy for some time, it seems, but very controlled, very limited. It remains to be seen how and if that might change following the US election. I mean, very much depending on who wins the election, but certainly if much higher tariffs are imposed on China, you may then see more aggressive policy with respect to the renminbi. At the moment, it feels like the Chinese authorities want to really control the pace, and that is why we see the very, very gradual moves that we've seen so far.
Do you have a level on any given pair? I'll let you pick the pair, but is there a kink or a tip point in this managed global depreciation against the dollar? Is it a yen level or yuan level where Elsa Lingos goes, OMG, we're going to have instability?
But it's very different in EM versus G10. You know, G10, where you're talking about market-determined exchange rates, the yen is a great example, right? Because as we approached 160, people thought, okay, this might be a line in the sand, and yet we traded straight through it. And actually, the Bank of Japan and Ministry of Finance have been very reluctant to commit more capital to intervention. The first round didn't really change the direction of travel for dollar yen. Yeah. So yes, you know, the yen is absolutely very cheap. We are seeing effectively this kind of ongoing creeping depreciation, if you like. But I'd be hesitant to pick out a level. I know, you know, some people are saying, oh, well, 162 or 165 is the new 160. You're not going to do that. It's just not the way that the Ministry of Finance is treating it right now, and we have to respect their action, and also, you know, respect the fact that the market is still buying a lot of dollar yen.
Elsa, looking at your research report, you know, you kind of break down your forecasts, you know, kind of 3-month and then maybe a 12-month forecast. And your 12-month forecast, one of your most bearish bets is the pound sterling. What's the call there?
Yes, I think sterling's an interesting one. We got a lot of questions after the UK election, you know, how does this change the view? And the reality is it doesn't really change it a lot. The facts on the ground are that the UK has very weak productivity that undermines sterling from a long-term valuation perspective. But also, over a 12-month horizon, I do think the Bank of England is going to be cutting rates, not aggressively, but going to be cutting rates. I think they'll probably be cutting a little bit faster than the Fed. And if that pans out, up until now, UK-based investors have been able to hedge their US assets for free, or play with their hedge ratios without giving it too much thought. And I think this argument applies both to the UK and to Canada. If you actually introduce a wedge into that equation where you now have to take into account a non-zero cost of hedging, I do think at the margin that weighs on the currency.
So I guess that makes some sense there. Swiss franc, how can you be bearish on our good old friends in Switzerland?
So look, I think what's going on in Switzerland is the following. If at some point we enter a global recession or a material global slowdown where volatility picks up, central banks are slashing interest rates, then yes, the Swiss franc is going to do pretty well. But in the current environment, and frankly, we just don't know how long it will last. This time last year, a lot of people thought the US was maybe 3 or 6 months away from a recession. Right? And now again, yes, the narrative out there is cracks showing in the labor market, but there's a danger in trying to call recessions too soon. There's that old joke, economists have called 8 out of the last 5 recessions. So in the current environment where volatility is low and where people are keen on carry trades, short Swiss franc or long dollar Swiss offers you very good vol adjusted carry. And at the same time, you've got a central bank which shows you that they're comfortable with further Swiss franc weakness. They actually cut rates last month because they were a little bit concerned about European political risk or, the prospect of this inflation or anything else. So that's where we are at the moment. And that's why I still think Swiss franc underperforms.
Paul's looking at 3,000 square feet on the eastern shore of the lake at Zurich. Elsa, a serious question. There's political upset in the United States. If we get a Biden second term, or we get a Trump second term, can we say that we have dollar resiliency and it's diminishing American exports?
It very much depends. And actually, I touched on this in my note because, certainly if you look at the bookies markets, the betting odds, they give Trump the advantage heading into the November election, right? And when I speak to investors and clients, I would say a very large majority expect a Trump victory. And yet, I expect that actually the dollar would probably move less on a Biden victory in that it would be perceived as an extension of the status quo. On a Trump victory, on a Trump second term, there's some very diverging views on what that would mean for the US dollar. Many people out there, myself included, think it could be pretty dollar positive, particularly if he's very aggressive on the tariff front. But others argue the long-term debt sustainability of the US or the pressure that Trump may put on the Fed would lead the dollar down. And I think it's that uncertainty which makes people unable to really trade it ahead of the election in the FX market.
Also, we got somebody out on YouTube, live chat on YouTube. Tom, I don't care about any of this. Just what does Elsa think about Sing Dollar? Sing Dollar they're not in a controlled depreciation in Singapore, are they?
It is a managed currency. I would defer to my colleagues in Asia on that question.
Oh, look at
rather
that.
than, yeah.
Okay. Elsa, got to leave it there. Thank you so much. Thank you. I can't say enough about her note, particularly this idea. And it was a real, when I came into this, the first thing I looked at was Asian currencies, and I said, get Damien.
Yeah.
And we can't get him.
Oh, and it's July. Come on.
It's July. Yeah. I mean, and then he goes over to Paris and he's in a cafe smoking jetons going, I take all of August off,
holding court.
That's the way he rolls.
That's the way he rolls.
Do we see him like September 15th?
We might get him back there right after Labor Day.
Not Labor Day. We got to wait
give him a little bit
after Labor Day.
US Open.
We'll get Damian Sassar on off the golf course here because there are some movements out there to give you some levels here. Forget about Brazilian real, not giving me much right now. Paul mentioned Euro Swissy. 0.97, I'm going to call that a churn, but Euro Yen, 174.76 for pros like Elsa Lingos. That's a wow statistic. Round it up to 175.
Yeah.
Like what?
Sure.
They got to raise rates.
Yep.
Or intervene, and Elsa said that worked out.
Yeah, we got the yen, just Japanese dollar yen, 161.49. Yeah. Remember, 160 breaching that was a big deal a month or so ago. Here we are at 161.5.
Early this morning, Paul, when John Tucker came in, early. I'm talking early.
I know he's.
Turkish lira went through a 33 level. That again, a depreciation here, a bit idiosyncratic. A really interesting day, churning into the CPI report tomorrow. Stay with us. worldwide across this nation. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the newsroom. It is Bloomberg Business Flash. The stock futures pointing to a longer advance for the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100. S&P 500 climbing for a sixth consecutive session on Tuesday. That'll be the longest winning streak since January. Yields, the two-year treasuries trading near a three-month low. Microsoft and Apple relinquishing the chance to be observers on OpenAI's board. A surprise decision kind of underscores growing scrutiny from antitrust regulators over the relationship between big tech and AI. Some other company news, 3M says its chief financial officer has resigned to pursue another opportunity. Latest CFO move announced this week among S&P 500 companies. You had the departure of Chipotle Mexican Grill's finance chief, United Parcel Services appointment of a new executive to that role. Right now, the Dow futures, they're down 5. S&P futures up 8.5 points. The NASDAQ futures 58 points higher. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio, I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paula and Tom.
Thanks so much, John Tucker. Greatly appreciate that. I'll get to Henrietta Treyz in a moment. I just saw John Lemire over at MSNBC. And with NATO in Washington, he's interviewing the new foreign minister of the United Kingdom, David Lemmy.
Very good.
And the sea changes of these elections, Paul.
Yeah.
I don't think we even understand the ramifications.
No.
This is a guy out of Guyana. His mother raised him, single-family home, went through the state school system in University of London, not the fancy schools.
Right.
First black United Kingdom member of Harvard Law School. And it's just, there's something going on here, folks, whether it's France or it's London, United Kingdom, and frankly, India, as Gargi Chaudhuri was mentioned. There's something going on this summer about democracy and vote, which is a good setup for Henrietta Treyz. She is the best at the pulse in Washington. Henrietta, the Treyz radar at Veda Partners. What is your radar searching for this Wednesday morning?
I continue to be focused on all of the members and understanding where the next shoe is that's got to drop. Obviously, last night we got Senator Bennett, Democrat from Colorado, coming out saying that President Biden has got to make the decision to step down. I understand that the president has made this a sort of elites versus the rabble situation where he's saying the voters want Biden and it's the elites who've turned against him. And what's ironic is I literally wrote a note the exact same hour as he wrote his with the exact opposite takeaway. The rank and file Democrats across the country, independents, moderates, and particularly female voters, have said repeatedly all year long they do not want another term for Joe Biden. They do not believe that he is up to the task. And it's been the elites who have said, you know what, we're going to stick with this guy. The senators are behind him, the House members are behind him, and now both tides are shifting. And I'm really just watching which senators, from an office or a chamber where Biden operated for 36 years is going to make the decision to say, hey, you know what? Thank you so much for your service. It's time to move on. That's really the only thing that matters right now. I think we're about a week and a half away, but that's the most important thing in D.C. right now.
Henrietta, is it in fact President Biden's decision and his alone?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, a big focus in D.C. right now is on the process. So specifically, where does the campaign fundraising go? Where do the dollars in the Biden for President PAC go? How do you migrate over the support of all the delegates that are now, technically pretty locked in for Biden? Who releases them? And that's up to President Biden. That's his decision alone to make. He's got, a really small core of advisors who are working with him on that. But the main question is just operational. Do we move forward with Kamala Harris? Do we move to an open democratic process with a sort of quasi-primary? Or does Biden stay in the race? And for the Biden team, their answer is we stay in the race. We continue to fight this fight. And we're in the best position to win. What's ironic is that the defectors in D.C. who have come out thus far, 7 House members and just a handful of senators, are basically saying, you are not the guy. We want your campaign dollars to be spread around. We have others waiting in the wings. I mean, an underreported narrative of this whole story is that Democrats have been raising boatloads of money since the debate, record hauls. They raised record hauls when Trump was indicted on 34 felony counts. So there is plenty of money to go around. It just is around sort of unlocking it and moving it on to the next candidate.
Timing. You mentioned a week and a half. Give us a sense of when we really, really, really have to have a decision and a path for the Democratic Party.
Really is like August 9th. That's when we really, really need a new nominee. The expectation and sort of the agita on the investment side, watching the DC side, is always fraught. I mean, anybody who's been through a debt ceiling countdown or a government shutdown countdown knows you just sort of like have a steely spine when it comes to DC. This is NATO week, right? So everything requires that the president have a really strong presentation. The United States has a strong presentation, the 75th anniversary, all that. But August 9th is really the deadline, the end time.
And there's so much out front here that's domestic, like the Republican convention in Milwaukee and that. Terry Haynes and others, Henrietta Treyz, and we value your opinions so much, have said polls. Are there any definitive polls yet? Or what poll to come is the one that matters for Henrietta Treyz?
I mean, honestly, the fact that I'm looking at polls from New York should be shocking to the Biden team. It used to be the situation where Joe Biden could run his state and Donald Trump was losing the one that he came from. Now it's precisely the opposite. Now Donald Trump is, making New York potentially a purple state the first time in 25 years, and Joe Biden's down by 7 points in Pennsylvania for your latest poll. I mean, the flip is everywhere. New Hampshire, Minnesota, leading is all over.
Okay, but you're incredibly wired. I mean, she has spies in the White House. I mean, Paul, it's unbelievable. She's got microphones in every room, in the green room, the Lincoln bedroom, and all. Henrietta Treyz, when they say you're down 7 points in Pennsylvania, how does the Biden apparatus respond?
They're honestly on this one, they're ignoring the poll. They're saying we remain competitive. If they do migrate off that narrative, it's to say we are the best positioned to win. They're running against hypothetical candidates with much lower name recognition, whether that's Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, or even Kamala Harris, who's got a 6% of the population that doesn't know who she is versus 3% for Trump and Biden. So basically, they just keep moving the narrative as frequently as possible and sort of cherry picking their opportunities, which is not a winning argument.
What kind of convention will the Democrats have here?
It's going to be loud.
Yeah.
I'm out of consensus on this, but I do not think that Biden will be the nominee in November. I think that right now we have, 3.5, almost 4 months worth of the campaign to go. The benefit of right now is that we are in, all-time record high TSA travel on airplanes. Record travel from AAA on automobiles. People are on vacation. We are in deep summer. So there's a lot of time for the Democratic Party to pull around the narrative. Having served on grassroots campaigns nationwide, a lot of voters, especially since sort of the internet revolution, do not tune into the election until the last couple of weeks.
Right.
24% of independents don't make a call on how they're going to vote until after Labor Day. So it seems like there's nothing left and time is of the essence, but there's really 75 of the most important days are still like 50 days away.
Paul, can we ask a nerd Henrietta Treyz question? Henrietta, come on. Connor Lamb out in Western Pennsylvania, there he was, poster child for the conservative Union Democrat and all that. Christopher DeLuzio is a first-term Democrat in the vicinity of Allegheny County, Pittsburgh. What's he think of all this?
Pittsburgh is, first of all, very near and dear to my heart, and as is Connor Lamb. I think that when Democrats look at Pennsylvania and they look at Pittsburgh, they've got to concentrate on the male voter. The male voter has abandoned Biden specifically. And it's not that they've abandoned the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party platform remains overwhelmingly popular. Legalizing abortion, legalizing marijuana, common sense gun control, things along those lines, versus the Republican platform, which is almost universally opposed to things like having teachers be armed in classrooms to stop gun violence in schools, pulling out of NATO. Those are things that are wildly unpopular with Americans across the board, including in Pittsburgh. And it's mostly the male voter that I would concentrate on there. That's where Democrats are hemorrhaging votes.
So if our interns just set to say a thank you greeting for Henrietta Treyz, we send her a case of Yingling beer.
Yeah.
Does that get it done?
That'll work.
I think that gets it done. Henrietta Treyz, thank you so much with Veda Partners. Really, really appreciate it. This one, she's the best.
Yeah.
I mean, we got Greg Valliere on yesterday. Gura, I thought, was lights out.
Yep.
I mean, we got Gura on a good day.
We did.
He has all the children at camp. I don't know how he does that.
That's right.
He gets them all. It's like the Michael Barr family. They all go away like June 28th, and they show up scrubbed August 29th or something.
Back to school.
Right? They all go to camp.
Yeah, well, they all go away, yeah.
We will see. David Gura, thank you yesterday. Greg Valliere, thank you yesterday as well. We'll do much more on this. Of course, the NATO meetings in Washington. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, John. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the world must not wait for November to drive back Russia's offensive against his country. Zelensky made the remarks while attending this week's summit of NATO leaders in Washington. He said the world was waiting to see what would happen in November when voters are expected to decide between incumbent President Joe Biden and Republican opponent Donald Trump. But he said there needed to be action before then to defeat Russian President Vladimir Putin in his war against Ukraine.
Biden and Trump are very different, but they are supportive democracy. And that's why I think Putin will hate both of them.
The summit comes as Democrats wrestled over President Joe Biden's reelection and questions over his acuity. Bloomberg managing editor Derek Walbank was asked about Biden's relationship with Democrats.
You haven't heard a ton of Democratic leaders, certainly some, but not a ton, who have come out and said that Biden needs to go. You do hear people saying increasingly, we're worried about Biden. We're not sure that he's done enough to convince us that he can go out and win this thing.
Bloomberg's Derek Walbank. Former President Donald Trump repeatedly teased his upcoming announcement of a vice presidential pick with one of the top contenders, Senator Marco Rubio. Trump at a campaign rally at his golf course in Doral, Florida, says he's ready for another debate.
Let's do another debate this week so that Sleepy Joe Biden can prove to everyone all over the world that he has what it takes to be president.
Trump says he wants the next debate without moderators. Novak Djokovic got a free pass into the Wimbledon semifinals today when his quarterfinal opponent, Alex de Minaur, withdrew with a hip injury. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Mike Labar. This is Bloomberg Tom Paul John.
Okay, overtaking all here, it's surveillance. Like even the interns are queuing up. They're over in Vespa, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Is the Vespa uproar of Paul Sweeney doing the Greg Peck, Audrey Hepburn routine.
Yeah.
Do you service them a lot? I'm seeing here Vespas, the first service is 625 miles.
I don't know when that's going to happen.
Like you're using the Vespa to go to the package store, right?
And
the packy, as we used to call it.
Exactly.
That's like 3/4 of a mile.
The beach, back and forth, 6 blocks.
So like your first service date is 2029?
Exactly. That's the way I hope it's going to be. So we'll see. So far, so good, cruising around the Jersey Shore. It's been a lot of fun. And there's a lot of people out there on these scooters all down the shore, so we have a little community there. We give it.
It's not a new thing. You know who used to drive a Vespa in New York City? The actor Burl Ives.
Burl Ives.
Yeah,
You're showing your age.
Going way back,
man.
That's before Michael Barr's time.
Yeah.
Way before.
Well, he was the voice of the snowman on Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Yeah, very good. Nailed the culture. She's like Scarlet Food.
Well, yeah, Vespas have been around for a very long time.
Do you really just take it to the liquor store? Is that
back and forth? Exactly.
Back and forth. You got the little,
Is there a cup holder on it?
Box on the back end.
Exactly. The case of Jenny Cream Ale, we're good to go.
This is like taking over Twitter. Sweeney's. It's like Roman holiday. I mean, it's like New Jersey, Atlantic Highlands holiday.
Exactly.
Can you see the movie now? It'll be great. We're having a lot of fun with it. I need a Vespa. That's all there is to it. Futures up 12. Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Yesterday, S&P 500 and the NASDAQ Composite each rose 0.1%, enough to bump up those indexes to all-time highs for the second time this week. The Dow, that fell 0.1%, S&P 500 registering 36 records so far this year. Investors today awaiting more comments by the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell to a congressional committee, looking ahead also to earnings report. Wall Street expects a report tomorrow to show consumer prices easing to about 3.1%. Now, among the earnings reports this week, Delta, we're going to hear from them tomorrow. Updates from JP Morgan, Citigroup, Wells Fargo. That comes Friday. That could provide more insight into consumer debt levels right now. Dow futures up 24 points, a rise of about 0.5%. S&P E-mini futures 13 points higher. That's up 0.25%. I should say 0.1% for the Dow. The NASDAQ futures right now, they're up 0.4%, up 74 points. Two-year yield lower, down a basis point, 460. The 10-year, 2 basis points lower. That is at 427. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. Yeah, that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
John Tucker, thanks so much. I mean, you go to Hollywood, you got to go to Mel's Diner. I mean, I assume Lisa will be there this morning.
Yep.
They got the hangover omelet, which is chili with cheddar cheese.
Oh, that sounds
she's
good.
not going to have the sirloin steak.
No, she's
That's
not.
what I have.
No,
usually
she's going to
when
have a little granola and
out there. She's
yogurt.
gonna, she's going to do some, it's like avocado toast.
Yeah, that's right up her alley.
I think Mel's
tea or
Diner is where
something.
she's got a roll this morning.
Yep.
Organic granola and low-fat Greek yogurt or milk.
That's it.
That screams Lisa Mateo.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
Your daily look at the front page is John Tucker in for Lisa Mateo. Brought to you by Interactive Brokers, their bond marketplace. Access their vast selection of over 1 million global fixed income securities, no markups, no built-in spreads, and low transparent commissions. Learn more at ibkr.com/bonds. And we thank IBKR for their Interactive Brokers, for their commitment to our conversation. John Tucker with the newspapers.
Yeah, this one comes from the Washington Post this morning. George Stephanopoulos caught on camera expressing doubts about Joe Biden. The ABC News anchor, who, of course, recently interviewed President Biden about his fitness for the race, was caught on camera yesterday indicating he doesn't think Biden can serve another 4 years. So he's seen in gym clothes outside the studios in a video published by TMZ. He's asked by a passerby, what do you think? Do you think Biden should step down? Well, you've talked to him more than anybody else lately, and you can be honest. I don't think Stephanopoulos doesn't look like he knew he was being recorded here. Just off camera, he's captured on fuzzy audio responding, he doesn't think he can serve 4 more years. A statement late yesterday, Stephanopoulos acknowledged he was the person seen in the video. The remarks come days after the interview with Biden, during which...
It's all TMZ thing.
Yeah, I mean,
gotcha.
I don't know if the person was working for TMZ or
Right.
just, but again.
But John, you live this every day. You're out on the deck at Atlantic Highlands, and you got to be worried that you're recorded.
Nobody
Over the lobster
on the planet Earth cares what I think about it.
But that goes to the issue, John. I mean, A, can he win the election? B, can President Biden serve a 4-year term? So it's a valid question.
Well, the gentleman from ABC is not looking at the immediacy in the debate that's out there, whether it's Trump or Biden. He's saying either of these people have to get out 4 years.
Yeah.
I have to get out 4 years.
Right.
Well, good luck with that. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Ivy League alumni clubs hustling for members. I go home on 66th Street across town. I don't know how many of those Ivy League clubs I pass.
Yeah.
I could never get into one.
I'll give you one.
I went to
moment.
Harvard on the Hackensack. Maybe that counts. The Princeton Club in New York, losing members, bleeding cash before closing its doors in 2021. Some remaining members explored a last-ditch overhaul. That stalled, so it's closed. So now the Ivy League schools with clubs in New York tend to keep most membership and other information private, but some of the recent events suggest more distress. The Yale Club for instance, changing its admission policy. You don't have to.
You don't have to go to Yale to go to Yale Club. I'll give you one vignette on this quick. I don't want to take a lot of time on this, but I believe it was Princeton University Press called me up and they said Kahneman's going to be here doing his book. And there I am at the Princeton University Club with Paul Volcker and Daniel Kahneman as he talks about his iconic book. We've just lost him, of course. And it's great. My basic take, John, on this is the Harvard Club, they've put a lot of money into and they've kept it spruced up over the years. The others, I don't think they've done a thing since 1962. Like, you know, they just ran out of time and they didn't keep the investment going to make them fancy.
You don't appeal to a younger generation when you have like these, you know, big stuffy chairs and like cigar smoking.
I don't know.
It's my.
They're all up. Like they're at Daniel Balloud's new, you know, Cafe Balloud. That's where the young kids are.
Anyway, this next one's from the Wall Street Journal. The latest cringe-worthy corporate buzzword. The CEO of a healthcare company recently discussed his company's latest results. During the Q&A, one of the analysts said, I wanted to double-click a bit on some of the commentary you had. This is one of the fastest spreading corporate buzzwords in recent years. Double-click. I think it's a little obnoxious, but double-click defenders say the phrase encourages deeper thinking.
I read the article. I'm as guilty of this as anybody. And I don't, you know, double-click, does it, you know, like, does it
I don't know.
really
It's
ring through?
I don't.
There's something about these tech-inflicted buzzwords, especially apt to gain traction. You have like network, bandwidth, take offline. The best part of the article is the Wall Street Journal reporter actually tracked down the guy who invented DoubleClick, the real, literal DoubleClick. The former Apple designer Bill Atkinson, retired now. He was reached on his boat by the Journal. He says, no, he'd steer clear of such usage.
Yeah, he's not going to.
Lisa will be double-clicking.
Yes.
I can just see Lisa, you know, she'll be.
Want one more?
One more, please.
All right, from Bloomberg Law, Bolero, accused of widespread age bias. A federal lawsuit in New York charges Bolero and two subsidiaries engaged in nationwide discrimination against workers aged 40 and older in a push to make over traditional bowling centers they acquired into young, hip entertainment centers. So at least according to the suit, the hiring practices that the companies implemented part of the ship designed to preclude potential candidates aged 40 or older from securing jobs at their bowling alleys. This is bowling people.
Oh, it's a bowling alley. All right.
Yeah, Bolero is bowling. It used to be, it was from Greenwich Village. It used to be Bowlmore, and they transformed themselves into a national brand and adopted the name Bolero.
So people still bowl.
People still bowl, but they want to appeal to a much younger audience. And that's aside from this lawsuit.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you guys ever been down there, but down below Home Depot, we've got the surveillance bowling lanes.
Oh, yeah?
They're like New England. They're candlepin. They're not like real pins.
That would be
they're like,
aisle 4 of the Home Depot.
They're candlepin. You know, I call them candlestick. You know,
very good. So
it's like, you know, Saturday afternoons
anyway,
on WBZ.
I'm sure Lisa would have done a better job.
I think so, too. Let's double-click on that right now. John Tucker, I guess, thank you. So when's Lisa back?
Yeah, exactly.
Next week, next Monday.
Yeah, she's out there for a few days out there. We got Carol Master and Tim Stenovic.
She's out there doing quote-unquote company work.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like a real job.
Yep.
John Tucker, thank you so much for the newspapers. Greatly appreciate that. Paul, it's a better lift to the market. We got 3 days waiting for CPI tomorrow, PPI. After that, the fact is Monday up, Tuesday sort of kind of like, and I got a better futures market today.
Yeah, we got the S&P up about 13 points. The NASDAQ up a little bit more, up about 75 points. That's almost 0.4%. Yields coming in just slightly. 10-year Treasury coming in about 2.5 basis points. 4.27% on your 10-year Treasury.
And the 10-year real yield I had at 2.00, now 2.01. But again, it's come in. And one of the things here, folks, this is important. It goes back to what we talked to Elsa Lingus about. There's a disinflationary tinge out there.
Yeah.
And it's like China came in with some disinflationary data. And, you know, I don't keep track of this stuff. It's Damien's job. But the answer is, it's a zeitgeist that's out there. I mean, you know, Damien's at a Stones concert.
Probably.
That's what he's doing.
Probably somewhere.
He's probably going to see Taylor in, like, you know, Moscow or wherever. Stones, good morning. Stay with us.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Apple's still minting more money than God, right?
Geopolitics front and center for global Wall Street.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off of another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
U.S. Secretary of State discussed the conflict in Gaza.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, John Tucker in for Lisa Mateo. Eventful day getting set up for CPI tomorrow with equities lifting right now. We're going to do the Sweeney interview here in a moment, Paul. We're going to double click in on the short-term paper market.
Exactly right. I mean, the two-year Treasury, Tom, 4.6%. We were at 5% on April 30th. So a big move in the short end of the curve here.
Well, I see it. We got a disinflationary tendency out there. Deborah Cunningham, hugely important in this global liquidity market. Federated Hermes, we'll talk to her in a moment. Lots else going on as well. Of course, all of the politics there. We're sort of lighter on France today in London.
Yep.
I mean, it's
we
there.
did that earlier in the week.
But NATO meeting, I don't even, John Tucker, seriously, do we know who shows up for France at NATO? Is Macron the one that shows up?
Yeah, no, I believe he's there, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
They show up.
I think you have to be there.
You have to. Oh, it's 75th anniversary.
Sure.
It's a huge meeting. It'll be interesting to see how the president adapts to the realities of Finland and Sweden being in the NATO meeting. We're on YouTube. Search and subscribe. You go into Google. You go YouTube Bloomberg Podcast. That gets you there. And then you can get all of Bloomberg podcasts, all the Carol and Tim show out in Seattle at the Bloomberg Green Festival. That'll be part of what we do on Bloomberg Podcasts. That's out on YouTube. Good morning on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as well. Of course, we're in the Interactive Broker Studios with our Bloomberg Business Flash, John Tucker.
All right, Tom and Paul, stocks closing at all-time highs. Jerome Powell's remarks to Congress doing little to alter the bets the Fed's going to be able to cut interest rates this year. S&P 500 hit its 36th record this year, and futures this morning, well, we could see it again. Right now, we're on track for a higher open. S&P E-mini futures 13 points higher. That's up 0.25%. Dow futures up 25 right now. The NASDAQ futures 74 points higher. That is up 0.4%. Microsoft and Apple dropping plans to take board roles at OpenAI. This is a surprise and also underscores the growing regulatory scrutiny of big tech's influence over artificial intelligence. A most active pre-market, you have shares right now of NVIDIA up over 1%. Some of the other movers pre-market, legal Zoom shares plunging down about 27%. The legal services company cutting the full-year revenue guidance to below consensus estimates. And Elon Musk chalking up a win, defeating that $500 million severance lawsuit over the firing of 6,000 Twitter employees. As we look at treasuries right now, the more policy-reactive 2-year, that is down 2 basis points. We're at 4.60. The 10 is down just about 3 basis points. That's at 4.26. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thank you so much. Let me frame this for you. And I don't do much of this on radio because technical analysis on radio, it sort of doesn't work. But this Paul Sweeney yield, the 2-year yield, frames out what's called a pennant. And good morning, John Murphy, and all the legacy of John Murphy and John Maggie back in the 1940s and 50s. And it's sort of like a pennant, Paul, and it pops off 5% on the 2-year yield. And we're sort of at a critical point here. And we need to get bearings here on your money market fund, your cash fund, your 2-year yield, and no one more qualified than Deborah Cunningham, CIO Global Liquidity Markets at Federated Hermes. They are iconic within money market history and the gazillions of dollars that goes in there. Deborah, where's your key level south on the 2-year yield now at 4.61%?
Good morning, Tom, and happy 50th anniversary for money market funds. It's a celebration.
You're making me feel old. You ruined my day.
Well, we weren't really around at the beginning, right?
No, we were not.
The last 20 years, the last half of that 50 years, half a century. Anyways, As far as the two-year goes, I think it's where it needs to be at this point in time. The futures market are looking to two cuts at the end of 2024, be that either September and December, November and December. And ultimately what that produces then from a 2-year yield standpoint is pretty accurate, I think. 5% was something that was a gift, if you will, a couple months ago. And it gave people a chance to get long. I'm not sure a lot of people did because they were enjoying the 5+% that they could get in money market funds and are still getting at this point. Nonetheless, I do believe that with the move, almost 40 basis points at this point in the 2-year, that's where it should be given the expectation for the end of the year and, confirmed by what I would say Chair Powell's comments for the most part were yesterday in his testimony.
All right, we heard from Fed Chair Powell yesterday in the Senate and today in the House. What do you expect the Fed to do this year? Because I guess the language yesterday, a lot of people felt like he was highlighting the jobs market, the labor market, and some of the stresses there, suggesting he may be more accommodative than maybe people had thought. How do you read into that?
Well, it is interesting because about a month ago, we started to see just subtle signs of a shift. The dual mandate from the Fed has been obviously inflation and employment, and yet all the Fed's focus has been on the inflation side of the equation, really for the last year and a half, since COVID for the most part. And the subtle shift that we've started to see towards employment with some of the numbers trending down a little bit, some of the job openings trending down a little bit, some of the quits ratios trending down a little bit, has brought that back into play. Now, having said that, when you look at what, sort of normal employment would be for a moderate growth economy, you're looking at something that's probably 100,000 jobs per month. And even with, the negative revisions to the last 2 months, we're still well above that. So I think there's a little bit of time, but I also believe that the Fed is now focusing more on that second aspect of their dual mandate. It's not just inflation that they're concerned with at this point. It's making sure that they don't overshoot with what they're doing from a rate perspective and send, the labor markets into something that is, more negative than what they're intending.
How do you think, I guess, Debbie, there are a lot of folks out there, both in academia and in the markets, that feel like the Fed is already behind the curve in terms of cutting rates, that, in fact, a lot of real-time data is out there suggesting that, boy, they should be cutting and cutting now. How do you think about that?
Well, they do try to be anticipatory. And certainly if you look at some of the regional indices, if you look at some of, the manufacturing side, if you look at the ISMs, both manufacturing as well as services, which was really a surprise, this month, you may draw that conclusion. I think where the Fed set their bar for inflation at 2% is maybe a target that's not necessarily one that's achievable, and certainly one that they need to get to before they start to act. I'd say anything below 3% rounds down to 2 in their mind, similar to, anything above 1% rounded up to 2, prior to 2020 in the pandemic. So I think that they are more keen and aware of some of the ancillary statistics, not just the main ones that they typically focus on at this point.
Deborah, quickly here, what are we doing with our cash? What do you actually see at Federated that people and institutions are choosing to do when they say, I'm in cash?
Well, from an individual standpoint, so retail customers, you and I, Tom, we're basically moving out of deposit products that still are very low in comparison to where money market fund yields are. And the growth in money market fund assets, 80% of that over the last 2 years has come from that trade, has come from that retail trade going into money market funds where they were getting 4%, 5%, and continuing on that 5% path for the time being. What the institutional side has been doing is being in the direct market. So they've owned repo, they've owned commercial paper, they've owned treasury bill securities on a direct basis. They will start moving into money market funds, however, once the first cut occurs, because then money funds lag. They keep that higher yield for longer.
Oh, congratulations to all at Federated. Even Steve Auth, who I know has never been in a money market fund in his life. But Deborah Cunningham, congratulations on 50 years of inventing this thing we all take for granted, the money market fund. Deborah Cunningham with Federated Hermes. Green on the screen here, a nice lift to the market. Different than Monday, different than Tuesday. Never different. Michael Barr, rock solid with our news in New York City.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, and John. President Joe Biden hosting the NATO summit in Washington touted the shield they've all provided for democracy for 75 years. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg.
NATO is not only the most successful and the strongest, but also the longest lasting alliance in history.
Meanwhile, President Biden is trying to rally support within his own party behind his candidacy, with his health being questioned. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter reports Democrats on Capitol Hill are starting to close ranks in support of President Biden.
A 2-hour closed-door meeting of the caucus with congressmen emerging saying in vast majority they have reached a turning point and need to line up behind Biden-Harris. Congressman Jerry Nadler, who over the weekend said Biden should step aside, has done a 180.
I'm fully supportive of him. I plan to campaign for him, and it's essential that he win.
And even if they were less enthusiastic, they say the job is to make sure Donald Trump doesn't win. Congressman Pete Aguilar.
Every single member of the House Democratic Caucus is clear-eyed about what the stakes of this election are. Donald Trump cannot be allowed near the Oval Office.
Biden does have a news conference tomorrow. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump, he held a campaign rally at his golf course in Doral, Florida. He teased that his running mate could be Senator Marco Rubio. Remnants of Hurricane Beryl are moving north, bringing tornado and flood threats. In Texas, millions remain without power in life-threatening heat. This woman lost power because of the storm.
It was a long, stuffy night, so I was tossing and turning because I'm pregnant and I'm uncomfortable.
The utility hopes to restore power to about 1 million people by the end of the day. At least 8 people have died because of the storm in the U.S. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, John.
You know the MLB streaming thing? I wish all the baseball was on one platform, none of this regional stuff. So I'm watching the Seattle Mariners. Good morning, Sid. We're doing this for Carol.
Okay.
Carol and Tim are out there.
Right.
And the Mariners are at the Padres, so they're in San Diego. It's warmer down there. And they have this pitcher, Logan Gilbert. Nobody knew who this kid was. He ends up at Stetson. He's just been picked to the All-Star team. And I love this. You know, Michael, it's so different than the New York Penn Rookie League. The Bethesda Big Train and the Cal Ripken Collegiate Baseball League is where this kid was discovered. And then he ends up, and I've been to their field, the Orleans Firebirds of the Cape Cod Baseball League. And he just got better.
You know what this All-Star break that's coming up very soon reminds me of the way we used to watch baseball. Because you had your regional games. You always had the games. You knew the Yankees, and unless the opposing team came in, you saw this player, this, that, whatever. You knew the Yankees. But you didn't know pretty much everybody else outside of the league.
And particularly in the other league.
Yeah, especially. So I don't know why I'm feeling this sense, but this is what this feels like.
And they're bringing the young kids. I mean, we're all talking about the same 4 players. I mean, there's A-Rod, there's, 4 guys on the Yankees, 2 guys in the Orioles, whatever. Yeah. And there's all these young kids that are going to shine here in the All-Star game. It's pretty cool. Yeah. Logan Gilbert, Seattle Mariners. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with his Bloomberg Business Flash. Stocks set to advance for a seventh straight session. Looking ahead to the second day of testimony from Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. And Microsoft, Apple, dropping plans to take board seats at OpenAI. This is a surprise decision. Walmart, those shares advancing. Piper Sandler assuming coverage on the retailer with an overweight recommendation. They also say in a note that Walmart is in the early stages of an unprecedented profit growth acceleration for a large and mature retailer. Among some of the other movers, Air Products, that is climbing after Honeywell agreed to buy the company's LNG unit. Dow futures right now 35 points higher, up about 0.1%. S&P E-mini futures 14 points higher, could do it again with a record, up about 0.25%. The Nasdaq futures right now 81 points higher. That's a rise of 0.4%. 2-year yield 4.60. That's 2 basis points lower, and the 10-year down 2 basis points. That's at 4.27. And we check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. 10-year real yield 2.01%, still within that range. It really hasn't broken down, but it may. Darkening the door. Stephen O right now, global head of fixed income at PineBridge Investments. I would suggest after the Powell Fest yesterday, after Chinese trending, I'll call it disinflation, tepid price change, what I see in Asia currency, totally obscure, really not out there in the zeitgeist. There's something going on, Stephen O, right now. Is it a disinflationary global trend in place?
I wouldn't necessarily say a disinflationary, but really a waning of inflation. Now, I know that's just semantics by and large, but China weakness and, as we know, they were the source of disinflation for so many decades. As they shifted their economy, they're now creating some of that lower inflation due to economic weakness, which is quite different overall. Right. But if you look at other economies in Asia, they're quite strong. And so I don't think it's necessarily a weakness trend and a disinflationary trend, but simply a returning a bit more toward normalized longer-term trend levels.
What evidence at PineBridge do you need to see to understand we're breaking out of range, whatever the series is, into some form of lower yield regime?
Well, I think we're already trending there. Inflation is a compounding year-over-year event.
I'm asking for Paul, because he's,
Exactly. But I think we need to think about what does a normalized inflation rate look like, and why is the Fed focused on that 2%? Why are other central banks focused on that 2%? And is there a range that is more appropriate for a balanced economy, which is ultimately the goal of most central banks that they want to achieve? And so we are trending down toward what probably is a much more balanced economic condition from a strong growth, hyperinflationary environment. But that normalized level of balance may not necessarily be 2%. And does the Fed come to terms with that at some point?
All right, well, given that backdrop, Stephen, do we sit here in a 2-year Treasury at 4.6%, or do we get on the credit curve and take some risk here? How do you think about it?
Well, we've been calling for a balanced approach for this year, and that continues. So on the one hand, that sounds like a bit of a cop-out of why don't you have more conviction? But I think if you look across markets, very little jumps out as being particularly cheap. Credit is quite tight. If you look at the yield curve, it's appealing. But on the other hand, I don't think that the treasuries will outperform credit given the economic environment. And so in a period when risk is typically trading tight or somewhat overvalued, that usually calls for being more defensive, which would say go into 2-year treasuries. But I think we're in an environment where defensive means diversified, and rather than going into lower risk per se.
So how about leverage loans? Because I see that high yield is the best performing place in fixed income. Do I want to go out even further and maybe look at the leverage loan market? Because I can get some good yields there.
Loans have been one of the top performing asset classes for this year, and it's a combination of the short-term SOFR, but also the spread that you're getting within the underlying asset class. We still think there's value in the leveraged loan market. Yields for the index are still in the mid 9%, which is among the highest that you can find in credit. But I think you have to be a little bit cautious in taking down your risk exposure within any loan portfolios. But we continue to see loans outperforming. And there's a lot of hyperbole regarding default rates going up and is facing a crash. We don't think that's warranted. We don't see the environment for loans resulting in not only default rates going higher, but default rates have largely peaked behind us already at very low levels.
When you're at Citadel, you ran the special situations group there. What's a special situation for you? What's an opportunity that jumps out at you?
Well, special situation is very broadly defined, and it typically involves a combination of either distress or an event taking place overall. And I think if you look at the components of the distress market today and focus on the CCC part of the market, optically it jumps out as being very cheap from a differential that you're getting over the single B part of the space. But if you dig beneath of it, you've got a lot of idiosyncratic business problems within that mix. It's not simply a cohort of businesses that are over-levered, but businesses with structural issues. And so we don't see too many opportunities there. It doesn't mean there aren't any opportunities, but I think as a basket, I'd be very cautious about adding any exposure.
You're hugely qualified on this. I am thunderstruck at how big tech is not doing out of Boston University's V-Bodie 101. They're just not issuing debt as hugely profitable companies usually do because it's cheap versus equity. Are we going to see debt issuance by big companies?
I think right now, on the one hand, you have had a significant amount of debt issuance in the investment grade marketplace. But when you look at the composition of the tech businesses today, one, they're flush in cash. And so there isn't necessarily a need to issue debt. And the cost of debt, while spreads are very tight, the all-in cost of debt is still reasonably high. And so I think if you're the CFO of these businesses and you're looking at, what do I use that debt for in terms of growing my business right now? I don't think
they need a yield breakdown to
that's
make
right.
it work.
And I think they're also looking forward with expectation that debt costs will be lower a year from now.
Right. This has been great. Are you based in New York?
I'm based in Los Angeles.
You're based in Los Angeles.
That's where Lisa Mateo is.
We got him. They got Lisa.
We're trying to get Lisa to do a live remote this morning from Mel's Diner. And, she wants a granola and all that. I'm trying to get her to have the hangover omelet.
Yeah, absolutely. Mel's Diner.
I mean, Mel's Diner is where you go. I mean, it's like what you do.
There's some big.
You're based in L.A.?
Exactly. I am based in
LA. What are you doing here?
Yes.
It's cooler there than it is here.
Weather-wise, yes, but, there's something to love about New York as well.
Great. Don't be a stranger. Stephen, thank you so much with Pine Bridge as well. Paul. A delay, but what is the quality? Let's double click on this.
Yes.
What is the quality of the delay?
John Tucker, we've got another delay out of Penn Station, New Jersey Transit. They're
I am
citing
shocked.
once again.
Shocked.
The overhead wire, that's been the excuse of the summer.
They get
overhead
hot
wire.
and they fall down.
They get hot and they sag.
And Secaucus. I mean, it's always happened since Secaucus. Poor Secaucus.
Why don't they just switch to the diesel?
The diesel works fine going down the shore, boy. It's nice and loud.
So are you talking ferry this afternoon?
I might. We'll have to see how. I mean, I could if I had brought the Vespa scooter. Then I had an alternative.
You could put that on the front deck of the Sea Streak, and you'd be smoking.
I know.
Go down Ocean Avenue right home.
Yep.
So.
Stop at bars maybe.
Really, you can take a Vespa on the ferry,
and then just Vespa on home.
And you can drive your Vespa on the streets of New York.
I could, but I don't think I would. But I think
I highly recommend that you don't.
Especially on 3rd Avenue. I mean, that place, you have to have your A game for 3rd Avenue. Because those people go nuts.
Because that's the way I go home in my car. And if I see Paul, goodbye, Paul.
So we're going to have a little bit of a commuting issue to deal with today. But we're used to it.
We had a sensitive conversation at home. Mrs. Keene said, you get a Vespa? No need to come home.
Just keep going.
So, Sarah, let's announce this again. New Jersey delays?
Yeah, up to 30 minutes in and out of Penn Station.
Good morning across the tri-state area. Good morning across the country to Stephen O's Los Angeles and worldwide as well.
There.
Economic data, big data tomorrow, CPI from New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. S&P 500 has clocked up its longest winning streak since January. Could keep going today. Round two also for Fed Chair Powell. He's going to be grilled today by members of the House. In the address yesterday, Powell emphasized mounting signs of a cooling job market, but he's pretty careful not to offer a timeline for any easing. Swaps traders, they continue to project 2 interest rate cuts this year, the first coming in September. Key inflation jobs data tomorrow that could provide further clues on the policy path. Tesla is set to extend gains for an 11th consecutive session. Goldman Sachs analysts raising their price target following better than expected deliveries. Pre-market also you have NVIDIA rising on evidence the AI boom continues to gain momentum. Its chip supplier Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing reporting surging sales. And 3M slipping after saying the CFO quit. Air Products climbing after Honeywell agreed to buy that company's LNG unit. Right now, the Dow futures 33 points higher, up about 0.1%. S&P E-mini futures 14 points higher, 0.25% gain. And the Nasdaq futures, they're up 80 points. That's a rise of 0.4%. VIX 1244. Two-year yield right now down 2 basis points, 460. The 10. That's down just about 2 basis points. That's at 428. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thanks you so much. We say good morning to all of you across the nation in the heat wave. And, I read very carefully the Washington Post. They had a great article. This is a time of year where they got some 23-year-old who's writing it like it's for a Pulitzer Prize. It was really dense, really rich, and it's really distressing. I mean, everybody can be pro-climate change, anti-climate change, whatever. The fact is, the duration, Paul, of the heat is what I noticed. And you mentioned you had a fog like you've never seen.
It's just, it's amazing. So, I mean, I don't know, I just kind of believe the science. I kind of believe the numbers. It's the numbers in terms of, the heat and then kind of where the long-term trends have been. And, the hottest day ever in Las Vegas a couple of days ago. And that gets your attention. I mean, so it just seems to be more pronounced, more prolonged. And you see it, having owned a property in California for many years, just the fire issues become so much more pronounced over the last 20 to 25 years. Maybe I was just paying more attention to it, but and we see it in the insurance for California. And so it is almost impossible to get a proper home insurance in the state of California. We actually had to go to Lloyd's of London. Those are the people that insure like ships going in.
Full insurance or half insurance?
Full insurance. We were the last block that had regular insurance, and then they just said no.
My birth family was south of Bakersfield, and they had half insurance.
Yeah.
That's all they could get.
Yeah, and it's like you see it in Florida as well.
It's tangible.
So a lot of these states are exposed.
Good morning to you. We're really chit-chatting here on the way to the CPI report tomorrow. Paul, this is a huge report.
Yeah.
I don't have any wisdom on up or down, but I think the zeitgeist this morning is a disinflationary tendency out there. Can you imagine if we reaffirm that tomorrow?
Exactly. So I think, the CPI ex food and energy, we'll call that kind of the core. Month to month, 0.2%. That's kind of where the world is. On an annualized basis, that's 3.4% higher than where the Fed would like to see it, but certainly well below where we were back in the pandemic.
We anticipate tomorrow's CPI report, lots of data, and Friday as well, and our economic indicators always here. I'm Bloomberg Surveillance, brought to you by Commonwealth. Join over 2,000 independent financial advisors are taking control of their growth with advisor-centric support and future-ready technologies. Grow on your own terms with a partner dedicated to your success. Go to commonwealth.com to learn how. With due acclaim, they said, let's double click on the Olympics, which is what we're doing. Joining us now, Europe on $5 a day correspondent Charles Pellet. Charles, I took my favorite hotel. I looked at the prices, and it's in the vicinity of the Olympics. And it's cheaper than what I paid 6 months ago.
You're absolutely right. I knew you were going to ask about hotel prices in Paris because that's what everybody wants to know. I did some research online. First of all, I made the mistake of picking the wrong dates for the Olympics, which everybody knows, July 26th through August 11th. But I picked the week before that. I was shocked. There were hotel rooms under $150. So I said, plug in the right number. I couldn't believe it.
That's what the Airbnb guy said.
Wait a minute.
But no.
Wait, 150.
But
the
no.
place I'm staying is not $150.
Right, correct. But keep in mind, I picked the wrong dates. This was a week ahead of time. So I went back, picked the correct dates. But there were many hotels that you could get for roughly $200. And to your point, Tom, prices really have come down. Yeah. So it's...
I guess maybe people just got scared away or something?
That's part of it. Also, too, people are realizing that maybe there are Airbnbs. People are realizing that maybe if you stay a little farther out of town, you can get some great deals. But also, too, you got to keep in mind the dates I was checking for. I said, you know what? Only people with Paul Sweeney money and Tom Keene money can go for the entire time unless you're on the company's credit card. I picked a random 5-day period, which I thought was reasonable to catch something. And I was stunned, absolutely stunned by what's available.
You're such a hitter. You get 12 weeks of vacation because you're Charlie Pellet. Give us a travel anecdote right now, like Greece Or are you doing a cool station like Oslo? What are you doing?
I've got an unbelievable cruise coming up, going to Scotland, also going to Iceland. But I tend to take a lot of nutty vacations that my wife absolutely refuses to go on.
Okay,
like
talk about the airport in Nepal that you went
exactly.
to.
That was just a couple of months ago. I went to the world's most dangerous airport, Lukla, Nepal. I wanted to fly in and out of the airport. Obviously, I made it. And that was a lot of fun. I took the world's shortest commercial airline flight up in Scotland, which, just to get to the punchline, lasts 90 seconds from one island to another. 90 seconds, it's like going from Manhattan over to New Jersey. It was great.
But Charlie doesn't actually get off the plane. He stays on the plane
basically,
and goes back. He's just on it for the flight.
And John, to your point, I went to L.A. I flew to L.A. a couple of years ago to keep my gold status on American. I literally flew from New York to L.A., same plane coming back, 90 minutes on the ground in L.A. My wife thought I was nuts, but you know what? It got me gold status for the rest of the year and for the next year.
And Charlie's the one who proposed to his wife on a flight years and years ago.
I did.
Do we want to tell him how you did it exactly?
I had the captain. This was back in the days when you could actually smuggle on a bottle of champagne and 24 roses on board and a ring, and nobody cared. But I worked it out with the airline ahead of time that the pilot would make the announcement that if the passenger in 3F would marry the passenger in 3H, please hit the overhead call button. And guess what? She said yes. And now she's kind of mad because I, quote, never got down on my knee and actually proposed. But
nowadays, you couldn't get this done nowadays. No. They'd probably screw it up. Charlie'd be talking to someone.
He'd be sucked out of a door panel.
Come on. Don't go there.
Charlie, where are you going next?
Next, we've got the trip up to Scotland and also to Iceland. And I'm glad that we got a chance to go over to Scotland because that's where the abandoned oil rigs are. And I wanted my wife to... Exactly. I wanted my wife to see that. But wouldn't you know if the cruise ship we're on...
She doesn't want to go.
It's going to go right into the port of Invergordon, and we're going to see those abandoned oil rigs.
Europe on $5 a day.
Got it. My pleasure as always, guys.
I got to ask, are you going to swim in the River Seine?
You know what? Here's a better idea. Yes, I would do it in a heartbeat because I would swim in the East River of the Hudson here in New York. You though, Paul, I can just imagine all of us getting together in Paris. We would have a wonderful time.
Guess who would order dinner? Let's listen right now.
Éloignez-vous de la porte qui se ferme.
Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. Working the French subways as well. Now we join too quick a visit, but we'll do it. Anna Wong is with us on a victory lap. And this is the nuances where you keep score. On the jobs day, not so long ago, Paul, you were here. Yeah, we're the only ones here.
Yeah.
On jobs day, there was a massive revision down. Anna Wong has led the nation in studying the revisions to come in our employed America. Anna, what did you learn from those revisions down in the jobs report?
I think there are many sources and reasons for revisions, but the big revisions we just saw was partly due to the very low response rate of the first release of our payroll. And, when firms are going bust and going bankrupt, I think part of the reason is that's one reason why they are not answering those surveys. And in fact, the June's non-farm payrolls response rate at just, I think, 57.4% is the lowest response rate since 1993. And so this means that going forward, we will continue to see more revisions just because of the low response rate.
So to summarize here, and Paul wants to get in here, you reaffirm that we are going to see a markdown in number of employed in America in the coming quarters?
Yes.
Anna,
see how she does that?
Yeah, right there.
We have to train her for Bloomberg Surveillance. Anna, we don't do one-word answers, okay? We got to put her in media training. She's got to work with Damian Sassower.
Just averaging out from my long response before, but yeah. So Tom, the reason why I expect to see continued downward revisions is that a lot of firms are not reporting because they're experiencing firm deaths, and typically in cyclical downturns, this is where firms started going bankrupt. We've seen higher bankruptcy rates, and that does not get taken into account into the BLS non-farm payroll data until a year or two after the actual data is released.
Paul, jump in here.
So, Anna, we're going to get some inflation data over the next couple of days with the CPI tomorrow and the PPI on Friday. What do you think Fed Chairman Jay Powell and the Federal Reserve Bank, what are they going to be looking at?
I think they will think that it will be a very good report. So Jay Powell said yesterday that we had a very good report in May and a good report in April. And they don't need a very good report to be convinced to cut in September. They just need a good report. But I think the report we're going to get tomorrow is a very good report with core CPI at 0.2%, which would map into the Fed's preferred PCE deflator of possibly around 0.1%. So that's very much consistent with the Fed's 2% target. And
right.
I think we are on track for a cut in September.
So are we in a disinflationary tendency after I saw China inflation today? Can you aggregate, Dr. Wong, and say the financial world is facing a disinflationary tone?
I don't think we're there yet, Tom. I think certainly part of the consumer basket is seeing deflationary forces. For example, I think now is a good time to buy boats, because boats and other recreational toys, goods for adults, are experiencing a decline in prices because that's the first thing people would cut in the budget. But on the other hand, there are some slow to catch up things in the components, such as home insurances and healthcare.
Right.
Those two are really big.
Anna Wong's giving her blessing to Paul Sweeney to buy the Vespa. I love that. Dr. Wong, thank you so much for joining us. Brilliant here on the dynamics of our job market. I go to the Intuit website, Paul, the global financial technology platform. It gives you the power to prosper.
I like that. That makes sense to me. But apparently they've got some issues going on. I'm just looking at the stock. They're laying off some workers. They're closing.
Well, laying off 10% of the workforce.
Exactly.
That's not a layoff. That's like an adjustment.
Yep. So we got stock trading off just a little bit here on the news. But the stock has been up about 4% year to date, 40% over the trailing 12 months. And this is a big company, big software company, personal finance software company, $180 billion in market cap. It's a name. Man, you just don't think of that.
And to Anna Wong, the key headline here for me, I know nothing about this, folks, will close Boise and Edmonton sites.
Yep.
So if you're sitting in a room and you got a right size, geography is one way you do it.
Yeah.
You downsize geography, and that alludes to what Anna Wong was just talking about.
Yeah, they have 18,200 employees as of the end of July.
She killed the revisions.
Yeah.
I mean, that was like a home run.
They were meaningful revisions.
It's over the turn.
111,000 jobs over the prior 2 months. That's going to get your attention.
The high point of the day, I think, has been John Stashower. You know, the Bloomberg Sports Report. I mean, the Yankees have lost, 22 of the last 23 games?
17 of 23. Thank you, Ari. And that's after winning the entire first 2 months of the year, being the best team in baseball. And then they lost to Boston, and then it turned it all around.
I don't know. Fascinating.
And injuries, but who cares?
We will see. We care about the markets. Futures up 14. Nice lift to the market. NASDAQ up big now, up 0.4%. I don't see an 11 on the VIX, 12.45. Maybe we'll see that move here in a bit. On that disinflationary tendency, I'm watching the 10-year real yield, 2.02%. We'll have much more for you. CPI tomorrow.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. The futures right now indicate higher open on Wall Street. Further congressional testimony by the Fed Chair Jerome Powell today. Key inflation and jobs data tomorrow. That could provide further clues on the policy path ahead for the Fed. The swaps traders continue to project 2 interest rate cuts for 2024, the first of which would come in September. In the pre-market, most active shares of NVIDIA, they're rising over 1%. Tesla set to extend gains for an 11th consecutive session. Goldman Sachs analysts raising their price target following better than expected deliveries. You mentioned Intuit cutting about 10% of its workforce. You also have some company news from BMW of North America recalling more than 390,000 vehicles because they're equipped with airbag inflators that can explode. They say leading to a potentially serious injury. No kidding. Right now, the Dow futures up 25, S&P E-mini futures 13 points higher. The NASDAQ futures right now 75 points higher. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thank you so much. Again, a nice lift to the market here, anticipating into CPI, PPI tomorrow. Futures up 13, and any number of things to look at. Again, I am looking at Asian currency pairs. There is a depreciation going on an idiosyncratic basis. Turkish lira prints 33 earlier this morning, now 32.88. So there's a lot of movable parts here. Joining us now, because they can double click. I mean, you know, if you're going to double click, you do it with odd lots. I mean,
that's right.
It's all the tech and the zeitgeist, and you know that. What are you double clicking on? What are you going beneath? What are you doing? Double clicking deeper on odd lots right now. Tracy Alloway, Joe Weisenthal. What's the lead?
So we had a really interesting episode with Warren Mosler, the godfather of modern monetary theory, earlier this week, in which he talked about how high deficit spending can actually be problematic. And he specifically described the current level of U.S. spending as spending like a drunken sailor, which is something you might expect.
A lot of people feel that way.
You would expect to hear it from like the Jamie Dimons of the world, and they've used that exact phrase. You would expect to hear it a little less, I think, from Warren Mosler.
I don't know. My entire lifetime, we've been talking about the deficit.
Yeah.
Nothing's changed, has it? There's no political will to do anything about this.
No, there's not. And the thing that really he identifies as the problem is not the deficit per se, and not even the debt per se, but the intersection of high deficits and debt with a Federal Reserve that's taken a fairly conventional approach to fighting inflation. And so in the MMT playbook, really you try to balance everything out with the fiscal. If you have too high inflation, you cut a little bit back. If unemployment is low, then you spend more, et cetera. Where he sees the sort of toxic mess brewing is that you have these large deficits. 7% deficits at a time of no recession is extraordinarily high by historical standards. You have a large debt stock, because debt to GDP is now over 100%. And then when the Fed is raising rates, the concern he has is that you raise the interest payments, and that becomes this self-perpetuating inflationary
But a lot
force.
of people really listen to this zeitgeist, which is not the Wall Street zeitgeist. And Paul, you're going to love this. Warren Mosler goes back to Beish.
I just saw that.
Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw that.
To Beish.
Wow.
Into William Blair.
Yep.
I mean, Tracy has no idea what we're talking about. This was the vogue 30, 40 years ago. Is Warren Mosler saying his thinking here, his theories, are the new vogue?
I mean, I think there has been a tendency in recent months for people to start talking about this idea that, maybe higher interest rates are fanning inflation in one way or another, primarily through there's two ways. So one, if you have inflation that's coming because of supply constraints, then raising the cost of capital means that you're not going to be adding additional capacity to things like housing, things like transportation and logistics. So that's one thing. But the other one that is getting more attention is this idea that Joe was talking about, that people are earning more interest on their investments. And so maybe those people have a propensity to spend, and maybe that ends up as additional demand within the economy. The question is how much, right? And the question is also like, okay, I'm a millionaire in theory with lots of U.S. treasuries, housing, stocks. Like, okay, I might get more income from higher rates on my treasury portfolio, but the value of my house might stagnate in a high interest rate environment or even come down a little bit, and the value of my stocks might go down as well. That definitely hasn't happened in this particular cycle, but I think that compositional effect is worth questioning.
So that goes to the one of the key issues out there in, I guess, just out there in society is just the bifurcation of the U.S. consumer. How if you are long assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, whatever, you're okay. You're more than okay. But if you're not, then boy, inflation's hit you hard, and you've got higher car payments.
Yeah, this is right.
Stuff.
So, and this is another element of the story, which is that, you know, $1,000 of income for a multimillionaire is not going to, I mean, this is conventional stuff. The marginal propensity to spend of a multimillionaire is going to be lower. So then what potentially cuts against this argument is the idea that, okay, maybe the multimillionaire, they own a lot of securities of various flavors. They're getting higher interest rates on it. But on the other hand, borrowers, say someone borrowing to buy a car, or someone, you know, need a mortgage or credit card payments or whatever it is, they're spending that. And, you know, how much do they ratchet back their spending? So it's a very complicated topic.
You've got the laureate, Joe Stiglitz, one of my favorite people coming
The other Joe.
Whatever your politics, Joe Stiglitz always makes the brain move. What's the angle with Professor Stiglitz at Columbia?
Yeah, so I was really surprised. A few weeks ago, Stiglitz was the co-author on a Fed working paper all about supply chain resiliency. And there have been a number of academic papers specifically on supply chains, but I didn't really expect it to be Stiglitz territory. Like, I still have him very much in my head as, you know, the author of Deglobalization and its Discontents, and talking about like the validity and the desirability of large international institutions. So I was surprised to see that and had to get him on the show. He talks in his paper about how incentives for dealing with capacity issues are kind of skewed. So this kind of goes back to what we were just discussing with Mosler. But if you think about what happened during the pandemic, like there were supply shortages everywhere, right? Why didn't companies just start producing more stuff to meet demand? Well, part of it is because maybe they couldn't get the parts, but part of it is also they're not incentivized to have huge stockpiles, you know, just laying around in case of emergency by shareholders who have rewarded them for efficiency.
And this is really the key assertion, because we've all woken up to supply chain risk as a result of the pandemic. But his argument is that even in normal times, that an economy in equilibrium will not produce buffer stocks, or will not produce any extra, and so that the game theory is such that everyone tries to produce the minimum, and then you get the spillovers from that.
No one cares. What we have is we have them here. Odd Lots is here. Tracy Alloway, Joe Weisenthal, live, August 1st.
Really?
Light, sweet, crude.
Are you going to come?
I'll try.
It's in the East Village. You live in Manhattan,
I'm in below 57th Street since Nixon was president. But how's it going? I mean, seriously.
It's good.
Gigging and,
we've never sounded better. It's going to be a good show.
Yeah, give us I mean, somebody's out on their Spotify. So, you know, play. Foo Fighters, Taylor Swift, and Light Sweet Crew.
That's right. Those are sort of the big three, I think, on there. But you know, we switched. Our drummer switched to playing guitar. It's
very Foo.
That's right. Yeah, just like Dave Grohl, and then we got a new drummer, and our new guitarist. He's a virtuoso. You got to just see him to watch it. You could talk shop with him.
To the band.
Say it again.
There's a new energy.
There's a new energy in the band. It's a little more guitar heavy. You could talk shop with him. You would really enjoy it.
It's a wild show now. That's how I got this head injury.
Yeah, that's right. Tracy was in the mosh pit. Tracy was on the mosh pit, and she got a big cut on her.
This happened.
You're okay? Everybody's worried. You're a little bit of an injury here.
I'm fine. I had a fun experience at the ER with some stitches.
How's the beast doing in the heat? I mean, everybody's worried about the dogs. My dogs are barely outside.
Yeah, well, we don't have air conditioning in Connecticut, so we have to be really careful.
Okay, we can take care of that.
It's an 1850 house. So
they have you don't have air conditioning?
We have coal heat that we keep running in the winter. Well, up until recently, but yeah, it's old.
Odd Lots with Joe Stiglitz. It's coming up. Joe Weisenthal, Tracy Alloway, Jackson Brown running on empty. Good morning.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation's still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, John Tucker in for Lisa Mateo. In the next 15 minutes, absolutely critical, the equity state of the markets here. And, of course, into the CPI report and into a busy earnings season. JP Morgan on Friday. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning brought to you by Interactive Brokers. Discover the future of trading with their next generation trading platform, IBKR Desktop. Download IBKR Desktop at ibkr.com/desktop. And we thank IBKR for their support as well. What an interesting day. You get the little bit of a fever here into the CPI report tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've got a little bit of a lift here in the futures markets. But again, CPI looking for, I guess, kind of steady, maybe even a little bit of moderating in inflation here. We'll see here on the consumers tomorrow, and then the producers on Friday. We get some UMISH data on Friday at 10 a.m. Wall Street time as well. We always like to take a look at that.
The Interactive Brokers Studio. We say good morning. The Bloomberg Business Flash, John Tucker.
All right, let's start off with Intuit telling approximately 1,800 of its global staff, that's 10% of the workforce, they're going to be leaving the company. Leadership says the move is not to cut costs. This is a strategic shift for artificial intelligence. Of course, stocks closing at all-time highs yesterday. Jerome Powell's remark to Congress, doing little to alter bets the Fed's going to be able to cut interest rates this year. S&P 500 hit its 36th record this year, and futures indicate maybe we'll do it again. S&P E-mini futures 13 points higher, up 0.25%. The Dow futures up 19. NASDAQ futures up 78 points. Microsoft and Apple dropping plans to take board roles at OpenAI. Surprise decision there. It underscores growing regulatory scrutiny of big tech's influence over artificial intelligence. And right now, most active pre-market shares of NVIDIA up 2%. We check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
The blue button there, the Detroit Lions blue button. Right now, we're going to do for the next half hour all equity markets. Really important. Ken Leon scheduled to be with us here in about 15 minutes. And this is a treat. We've got Gina Martin-Adams with us with Bloomberg Intelligence. And Phil Newhart with us as well from First Citizens Bank. And this is a joy for them because, I can't imagine with Phil, with the fundamental skills, the technical skills, the economic skills. What was the first day like with Gina Martin-Adams as your boss?
Well, I was an intern, and we worked on a fixed income trading floor at Wachovia, and I sat next to her and was hugely intimidated, but then got to know her, and it worked together.
What was the work ethic?
Tom, there was a day when I was young too.
Yeah.
She was young. I was just younger.
What was the work? Seriously, what was the work ethic you got from Gina Martin-Adams? She's a beast.
Incredible work ethic.
It's 24/7.
24/7
is the bottom. Okay, where do you guys? I'm sure you've compared notes to get started here. Where do you disagree on this upcoming earnings season? Let me start with you, Phil. What's the distinction here between you and your former boss?
Yeah, look, my view of this earnings season is it's going to be all about margins. We have a higher bar to clear. Expectations are 9% growth. So the last couple earnings seasons kind of a low bar to clear. This one's a little bit more interesting. And do we start to see a broadening outside of sort of the biggest names? What happens in sectors like healthcare and energy? That's what I'll be watching. I think we have a beat because we always do, but I think it's a little bit more mixed, and I think it could drive some choppiness in the marketplace.
And Gina, maybe it's just me, but I'm going to be really focusing on these tech names because I'm just waiting for that NVIDIA print or Microsoft print where the guidance is just a little bit off, and that might be all you need for this sell-off that a lot of folks have been suggesting.
There you go, Mr. Gloom guy.
I'm ready.
Well, I think you have a justified concern, mostly because that's been the only place of growing optimism. Over the last 9 weeks, we've seen earnings estimate revision relatively flat, actually falling for the consumer industries, falling for energy companies, falling for industrials, but still rising for tech. So to the degree that there is a bullish expectation, it's definitely embedded in the tech space. And then even tech and tech adjacents, really anything related to AI, is where analysts have been behind.
Yep.
Admittedly, for 2 quarters, these companies have been able to just pummel analyst expectations, but analysts have very quickly caught up. And they keep increasing the bar for these companies. So if there is a miss, it probably comes from there. Not to mention, if you look at the way that the market has traded over the last several quarters, this is the only expectation of the market, is that tech is going to do well. So if there's a beat, it probably does come from those other sectors that are just missing in action, that really haven't been a part of the story. We call them the 493. Outside of the 7, that's where you could get a pretty significant beat and some growth finally.
Okay. Phil, what's the underlying economic backdrop for you guys at First Citizens to support this earnings season? I mean, how do you guys feel about this economy? We're going to get some inflation data starting tomorrow.
Yeah, relative to the stocks first, we're waiting for broadening like everyone else. I think there is a bit of an argument for it, right? I mean, if you look outside the top 10 names, they're not that expensive versus their own history. If you look at the largest 3,000 stocks, 25% have gross margins over 60%. That's well above average. So it's not that these other names can't participate. We just need to see it. In terms of the economic backdrop, we're starting to see sort of two-sided risks, right? We've come from an environment of, it was all about inflation, all about beats in terms of economic data. Now we're starting to see some disappointments: retail sales, personal consumption, downward revisions to payrolls, ISM below 50. So it is, in our view, time for the Fed to start to look at the other side of their dual mandate, and that's kind of the setup for us coming to the back half of the year.
Gina knows what I'm going to do. I'm going to go up the income statement, and he had you Tom Gelvin years ago at Donaldson Lifkin. Gina, I've got nominal GDP coming in. On revenue growth, we had these shocks. I never forget Honeywell, 8% revenue growth. Where did that come from?
Right.
Et cetera. Do we need to get set for a lower single-digit revenue growth blended across 500 stocks?
Yeah, and this is definitely embedded in the consensus expectation. All of the optimism, if you decompose the income statement, is in margin now. Revenue growth is really not expected to grow faster than 4 to 5% into the next 6 quarters.
But then Phil,
it is just
but the big tech stocks aren't at 4 or 5% revenue growth. Are they going to disappoint where we're like, oh, they're going to do 19%, and they come in at 18.6%, and Sweeney falls off the Vespa in New Jersey?
I think for some of the names there's a possibility, and the reason is that analysts have been burned and are starting to up their numbers pretty high. So you could have an 18 versus a 19, and what's going to happen is you're going to see a correction in those names. And as Gina said, it's going to be about the other 493. But I think that's absolutely the opportunity set.
Gina, how are you guys thinking about valuation these days? Do we pull out the Magnificent Seven and look at the market that way? Do we not do that? Is that a little bit cheating? How do you guys think about valuation?
Yeah, it's very clear to me that valuation has been largely driven by optimism in one specific segment, and that's AI. When we decompose the index into its AI-related stocks, we find 40 stocks have driven the entirety of the earnings growth. They also are responsible for 80% of the valuation premium on the S&P 500. The other 20% of the premium is really weak earnings or negative earnings that we're kind of digging our way out of right now. So I think it's very important that you look not just at the headline. The headline does not tell you anything about the valuation of the market. But even if you do look at the headline, you have to consider where we are in the business cycle, where the yield curve is, where spreads are, where long-term earnings growth prospects are. And even if you do look at the headline, our models would say you're justified to pay 20 times earnings for the S&P 500 right now because of where you are. We're digging out of this earnings recession. That's an incredibly important point. And rates, while they've adjusted higher, the yield curve is now off of its maximum inversion point. So that makes a really big difference for what you pay.
Phil, I got to get this in here with the time, but I think it's really important. Gina Martin Adams works in a hermetically sealed, multi-gazillion-dollar building with air conditioning. Right. She's lunching. Should I go to Cafe Balut or Michael's today? You are in the real world.
That's right.
Is there an anticipation for stocks on the streets where you are down south?
You know, I think there's some skepticism in Middle America. We're up 17% year to date. We've had a 5% max drawdown. So I think there's belief that we could see some volatility. I don't disagree with that. We remain constructive longer term. Our bull case is...
Isn't that what you see, Paul?
Yeah. He's down in Raleigh, North Carolina, Research Triangle Park. That is one of the better growing areas in the country.
Yeah. Absolutely. So it's booming. Businesses in the Triangle are doing well. When you get outside of that, you start to see a little bit more Middle America. They're more
like Duke in Chapel Hill.
That's right. Exactly. They're more impacted by inflation, wage inflation.
Is Duke Middle America? What's a tuition? 90,000 a year?
Duke is not Middle America.
No, Duke is not.
Duke is not.
No.
But it's surrounded by Middle America.
How far? I'm sorry. I'm the north. I've never been below 59th Street. How far is the Research Triangle from the academic nexus of Duke and that other school?
10 minutes. Everything's
right in the middle.
Yeah, right smack.
So you
in the
have Duke, UNC, and NC State.
Oh, they're in the Research Triangle.
They are. Mm-hmm.
So they're not Middle America.
It's all the same thing.
Did they call it the Duke bubble?
No, it's
No.
just the Triangle.
But that would really offend Tar Heel
Yes,
fans.
that would.
Yeah, they would not appreciate that.
And NC State?
Can we do this again?
Sure, that's a good
Absolutely.
idea.
This was great. I mean, Michael Barr was tearing up. It was so excited. Gina Martin Adams and her intern, Phil Newhart, with us with First Citizens. Great to have both you and Ken Leon coming up with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, and John. President Joe Biden hosting the NATO summit in Washington touted the shield they've all provided for democracy for 75 years.
Only 9 NATO allies are spending 2% of their defense GDP on defense. This year, 23 will spend at least 2%.
Meanwhile, Biden is trying to rally support within his own party behind his candidacy, with his health being questioned. Vice President Kamala Harris spoke at a campaign event in Las Vegas, acknowledging to supporters that President Biden's campaign has gotten tougher since his admittedly poor debate performance against Donald Trump. Harris assuring the crowd she and Biden will win in November.
The past few days have been a reminder that running for president of the United States is never easy. But the one thing we know about our president, Joe Biden, is that he is a fighter. He is a fighter.
Meanwhile, we might have a better idea now of who might be Donald Trump's running mate. During a campaign stop in Miami, Trump teased but did not officially announce that Florida Senator Marco Rubio could be Trump's choice as the candidate for vice president, referring to the number of reporters and news outlets covering the rally.
I think they probably think I'm going to be announcing that Marco is going to be vice president. I don't know. Because that's a lot of press. That's a lot of press.
Meanwhile, he challenged President Biden to another debate, this time without moderators. Rocked by Hurricane Beryl, southeast Texas is soaked and without electricity. Utility crews are working furiously to restore power to millions in Houston. CenterPoint Energy's Paul Locke.
When the storm blew through, we lost 2.2 million customers system-wide, which is 80% of the customers we serve in the Houston region.
At least 8 deaths have been reported in the U.S. because of Beryl. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, and John.
Thanks for that, Michael Barr. Just a huge listen here out on YouTube and real interest. David from Chapel Hill emails in.
Oh, boy.
He says, enough Duke boosterism.
Yep.
That's what you get there. Who has a better nightlife? It's Thursday night.
Great question.
You know, you got a test Friday morning. Who cares?
When I was at Duke, it was definitely Chapel Hill.
Chapel Hill has a
now
better, which
it's
explains why David Gurr is the way he is.
Exactly. Now it's the opposite, I would say, because there are so many new bars and restaurants in Durham. It's become a hot little market down there.
But are they like a real college bar, or are they some institutionalized
everything.
thing for people that play golf?
Both, everything. They've got just the number of restaurants and everything, hotels in Durham has just exploded.
Do
in the
they
last 10
drink
years.
the same beer?
Oh yeah, yeah.
What is there like a North Carolina beer?
Not really.
Budweiser.
Yeah, exactly.
A can of
In a can.
Budweiser. It's Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker, the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. The S&P 500 has clocked up its longest winning streak since the month of January. And it's round two for Fed Chair Powell. He's going to be grilled today by members of the House. In the address yesterday before members of the Senate, Powell emphasized mounting signs of cooling job market. He was pretty careful not to offer a timeline for easing. Swaps traders, by the way, continue to project up to 2 interest rate cuts for this year. Some company news: Intuit cutting about 10% of its workforce and closing its Boise and Edmonton sites. This is all part of a reorganization plan. They're going to take about a $250 to $260 million charge as a result of that. A key U.S. inflation jobs data tomorrow that could provide further clues on the policy path ahead for the Fed. Tesla is set to extend gains for 11th consecutive session. Goldman Sachs analysts raising their price target. Also in the pre-market, most active shares of NVIDIA. They are up 1.8%. Dow futures up 17. The S&P E-mini futures 12 points higher. The NASDAQ futures right now up 81 points. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene. What we're doing here is getting you ready for earnings season. Great to have Gino Martin-Adams with us, Bloomberg Intelligence, Phil Newhart for Citizens. And joining us now, a foundation to our coverage on Friday, Kenneth Leon is at CFRA. His wheelhouse is banks, but he does so much more in an old school way at CFRA. Ken, thank you so much for joining us ahead of the madness. I want to ask a general question. I know Paul's all banks, but Ken Leon, what's your analog to where we are right now? How nifty-50 are we? How July of 2000 are we? Or some analog I can't remember back to the 50s. What's the compare to where we are right now?
Thanks for the question. Great to be with you guys. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the late 1990s. Valuations are getting a little bit stretched. Since 2005 for the S&P 500 valuation. Today we're at a 35% premium. And of course, there are 7 stocks that are a meaningful percentage, maybe 35%, of the weighting. So it's kind of weird compared to classic or historical, but that's the world we're in, Tom. And there are aspects of the Magnificent Seven on fundamentals that are different than when I was situated covering telecom in 2002, listening to John Chambers, and all of a sudden demand and supply didn't make sense. We're not seeing that with AI, so I think we have room to run here still.
All right, Ken, we're going to start hearing from the big banks on Friday, JP Morgan, Citi, Wells Fargo. I'm looking at these stocks, and year to date, they're all up mid to high 20% returns. What's driving these big cap stocks these days?
Sure. So let's sort through this first from a macro. After technology, the financial sector is very important, but it has underperformed the S&P 500 significantly. There's a disparity too, and to your question, the larger banks or diversified banks are on par with the S&P 500, up about 17% year to date, which is impressive versus historical. But the regional banks, of course, are down 7%. When you look at the diversified banks, and I cover the 5 largest global banks, what we are seeing is more durable, recurring fee income, non-interest income. We're seeing banks very well situated with the consumer as well as corporate. And my eye is on this. Their performance is going to be very good, but it's heavily weighted or skewed higher to U.S., being 70 to 80% of revenue. So we have a delta in the future of Europe, which I was in Germany just 2 weeks ago, or in Asia, which is down 25% on investment banking year to date. So it's a very interesting dynamic, but these banks are solid. We also saw post the Fed results on the stress test that for Q3, these large banks are going to increase their dividend 9%, Citi 6%, the rest 9%. And any tighter regulation, something called Basel III Endgame, we're seeing that the U.S. policymakers, Fed, want to walk it back where the worries of increasing this capital reserve. I like the picture here. I really do.
I know. I kind of I agree with you. I look at some of these big banks, and it seems like they make money when interest rates are going up. They make money when interest rates are going down. I mean, it's just the way they've constructed their businesses here. It's almost like the capital markets business doesn't really matter that much anymore.
So, like politics, when you're looking at banks, we're a worried group of analysts looking at credit risk. And right now, CFRA, every quarter, we do every bank on delinquency. Credit card loan losses will be up, but the volumes are much higher. And so I think that's manageable. And auto loans, unemployment is low. So, when you look at the overall picture for these banks, they're just in an ability where they're becoming much more reliable to generate growth and to generate profitability.
I want to give you these numbers, Ken Lee, and these are Bloomberg numbers off the FA screen. These are not CFRA, and I can't say enough, folks, about how CFRA, Ken Leon, Sam Stovall lay out individual securities. It is wicked old school and hugely valuable. Ken Leon, I got a 24-year estimate, calendar 24 on JP Morgan. They're going to make $168 billion. They're going to drop 46% of that to operating income. They're going to make 29 cents in the dollar, $168 billion. They're going to net clean $48 billion. In this earnings season, isn't their number one goal to hide how successful they are?
Well, it's a great question, and Jamie Dimon is brilliant. And now he talks about macroeconomic risk, political risk, and talks down the book of JP Morgan, which always continues to excel.
Why do people like you and the Young Turks, someone as grizzled as Ken Leon knows his charade, why does the security group let them get away with that and do macro babble instead of explaining bank concentration in America?
We get it, and of course, they have such a depth in management and execution and gain wallet share across different business lines, and that was clear on Investor Day. The other banks are fine. They're doing a great job, but it is brilliant how JP Morgan, so through the more difficult years, has always been a core holding for investors. But then as you look at an acceleration of growth, JP Morgan is still there. Every other bank certainly looks to them as the benchmark, but we have really good stories here with Goldman Sachs, very different than 24 months ago. We have Citigroup, which put an Investor Day, would put it to light all of these businesses that are transactional, treasury, which are durable, but a little bit different. So I think overall, these are very healthy banks, and it's kind of like night and day between the ones that I cover, the globals, which make up, quite frankly, the core holdings in institutional portfolios, and what we see with smaller banks.
All right, Ken, thank you so very much. Appreciate that. Ken Leon, Director of Research, CFRA. Again, we're going to get the big banks, Tom, Friday reporting Wachovia, which gives you a little bit more of, I guess, a regional, super regional bank feel. But then, of course,
we have
Citi, JP Morgan.
on Friday?
Yep.
I mean, Wells Fargo.
Wells Fargo. I'm sorry, Wells Fargo. Sorry.
See, that we're showing our age there. We're showing
exactly.
Wachovia. The younger crew, Ken Filio's in our
global
technical
Carolina
director
National
saying,
Bank.
who?
Exactly.
Who? This is important. I was distracted there, and Paul saved me once again. Timothy O'Brien drives Bloomberg Opinion, iconic at the New York Times. And Tim O'Brien is the expert on Donald Trump's finances, going back well in excess of 30 years. And he has an essay this morning, which I missed. Thank you, Paul, for bringing this to my attention. The headline's simple. Joe Biden needs to accept it's time to step aside. It's just as simple as that. That's a powerful headline from Timothy O'Brien.
And that is Bloomberg Opinion.
Bloomberg Opinion there. He leads with Ruth Bader Ginsburg and that. I'll have to read that. That'll be out. I'll put it out on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. Tim O'Brien, an important essay for Bloomberg Opinion. We need to get the markets open here before CPI tomorrow. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. In fact, the opening bell report ahead of the open, the cash open on Wall Street. We do need to know that stocks closed at all-time highs yesterday, with Jerome Powell's remarks to Congress doing little to alter bets. The Fed's going to be able to cut interest rates this year. And again, it's round 2 of Jerome Powell as he testifies before members of the House today. Right at the open, S&P 500 is higher, extending those gains up 14 points right now, 55.89 on the index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is 14 points lower. The NASDAQ 100 right now, 81 points higher. That is up 0.4%. And Intuit cutting about 1,800 employees. CEO says the move not meant to cut costs. The company expects to rehire the same number of workers, primarily in its engineering, product, and sales division. And Intuit in the early going down 2.3%. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that is the opening bell report. Paul and Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. Green on the screen right now, the VIX 12.47. This is a joy. I had a book that came out years ago, and we did an American book tour. And then we went over the United
That's the book,
Kingdom.
Paul, that immediately went to the bargain bin at
It opened
Barnes
at the
&
bargain
Nobles.
bin. Yeah, it opened at the bargain bin. And then we did this circle of investment houses in London. What a difference. I mean, it's amazing how different they approach securities analysis, finance, investment, and return in England. Ruffer is interesting out of Edinburgh, and in London, Paris, and in New York. And joining us now is Matt Smith, their investment director, on a different approach. I've got to ask to start, does Ruffer need to write a note on the election? How much have things changed in the United Kingdom off the new regime, the new guard?
Not much has changed yet, I'd say. The thing about the UK is that we had our bond market explode in September, October 2022. And so both sides of the aisle are worried about excessive budget deficits. So really they're kind of constrained in what they can do unless they put up taxes significantly, and we won't probably find out about
this is a key regime. Freya Beamish at T.S. Lombard publishing on this moments ago. And I looked, Matt Smith, at this basic word in the huge U.S., UK, continental Europe difference, which is austerity. Do you buy the idea that labor and secure will diminish or eliminate austerity?
What austerity? Even the supposedly fiscally conservatives have delivered pretty big budget deficits in the UK. I don't think there's a country globally that is really trying to shrink its budget deficit, and that's most evident here in the US, right?
No.
I think that's what's striking, is that neither party is talking about shrinking the budget deficit. It doesn't really even come up in conversation. And that, I think if you ask me, what's the most likely reason inflation is going to remain persistent, a 6 to 7% federal budget deficit is a pretty good starting point.
Matt, I know in your notes, this kind of jumped out at me. Our preoccupation is with not losing money rather than charging headlong for growth. If that's the case, how nervous are you guys about this marketplace here, whether it's concentration of performance, lack of breadth in the marketplace, absolute valuations, geopolitics? How do you guys view the market just starting off then?
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty skittish at the moment, I would say. You've listed 4 pretty compelling reasons. We think we've had an inflation regime change from a ceiling of 2% on CPI, like kind of oscillate around 1.5 to 2. We think it's now a floor of 2%. That has big asset allocation implications that the market just hasn't reflected yet. There's a 5% risk-free rate, and that does not seem to be a message that's being received by any asset market or the economy, really.
How does it drive in the United Kingdom between I gotta buy NVIDIA, I gotta buy Microsoft? Is that driven by your clients telling you they need to own those Or are you telling them they've got to play the U.S. Mag 7 game?
We're telling them they've got to avoid the Mag 7, for sure. This is, as you said, Paul, this is a narrow, we think, dangerous market. There's no denying that AI is a paradigm shift. But what markets do, what financial markets do, is turn a good idea into a bad investment by chucking too much capital at it. And that's, we think that's where we are. There's no denying that there will be great returns to some companies from investing in AI. But the whole point of these tech companies is they weren't supposed to do much CapEx. They had these very high margin, asset-light businesses, and they're now having to build a ton of stuff. The question is, are the returns on those investments going to be as high as investors currently demand?
Well, it's tough from an investment performance perspective over the last at least 2 years, if not longer. If you're not long these stocks, you can't put up any numbers because that's the only place to get performance, isn't it?
Yeah, you don't need to tell us that.
Okay.
That's correct. But I think the interesting development has been that in the last 2-3 months, you've started to see the rest of the market fall on days where the Mag 7 is are appreciating strongly. And that tells you, I think, that people are unable to add leverage in the way that they used to. If they want to buy NVIDIA, they have to sell something else.
Right.
That is typically late cycle behavior.
Really important question. This goes back to all the competencies of Ruffer and Rathbone, before. Now, not that I'm expert on the UK brokerage model, Casanova and the rest, but is there a new enhanced Anglo-American psychology among corporations on the continent and in the United Kingdom? Is it becoming more American-like in Paris, in Berlin, in Munich, etc.?
I'd say yes. That's most evident through the increased focus in the European market on buybacks. Buybacks are very Anglo-Saxon, very capitalist concept, right?
Some would say it's very Atherton, but that's a different,
well, you're investing in yourself. You're shrinking your equity capital. That's not typically how the Europeans have done it. Right. But they have fallen way, way behind in performance terms since the global financial crisis. They recognize that, and they're starting to take action. So
at Ruffer, are you guys all equities or are you across asset class?
Multi-asset, yeah.
So what's your asset allocation these days?
So we've got a kind of a structural position in inflation-protected assets like long-dated TIPS and the UK equivalent, gold, silver, and platinum. And then most of the portfolio, really nearly 2/5 of it, is in cash and the risk-free rate.
Really?
Which is way higher than our historical average, but we think reflects the very compressed risk premia in global markets, the very high risk-free rate. Quite a lot of that is in the Japanese yen as well.
Okay.
You're starting to probably paint a picture of not stellar performance, but we think we're buying assets that are extremely attractive should anything change in global markets.
Yeah, you're such a hitter. Were you at Silverstone for the British Grand Prix?
I sadly had to miss that. I was on my way out here.
It was so cool. It was like, it was absolutely spectacular.
Was it? Okay.
It was interesting because it rained, right? You had change of weather. What have we not had in U.S. asset markets? A change of weather.
Yeah. No, it's a nice illusion, but to me it was just it was so damn British, Paul. It was like spectacular.
So
the rain
the streets of London?
No, this is Silverstone. It's out in the middle of nowhere.
Okay.
It's like halfway to Edinburgh, whatever. And it was great because Sir Lewis came on at the end and won the thing. And he was really emotional. It was really, I thought the king was going to show up to give him a hug. But one final insight. What do you think about American exceptionalism in the investment world? How do you sell that at Ruffer?
I think it's been driven by 3 things. Firstly, the best companies in the world are here in the US, and they've rightly been rewarded for that. But the fact of the matter is that at a 5% interest rate, only the government is borrowing money. Mortgage volumes are down where they were in the early 90s. Commercial bond issuance is basically done for refinancing purposes. It's only the government who's borrowing money, which I think tells you that this economy is starting to stagger. It's starting to feel the weight of that interest rate. So that exceptionalism might be starting to come to an end, not least because a big driver of it has been fiscal spending.
Yep.
Huge budget deficits, and those can't continue forever unless inflation is the thing that you're not worried about.
Thank you for joining us in New York. Matt Smith with Ruffer. We don't do enough of this. Get
well, we could
the
fix it,
folks
Tom.
in
We
from
could
the
go
United
over,
Kingdom.
get the Ned, and we could see these guys.
We could, we could go to Edinburgh, hang out, the Balmoral. I've never been there when the wind was under 30 miles an hour.
Forget it.
I mean, ever. Like I've been there like
There's
3-4
wind,
times,
it's off.
and you land and the wind, and it's just like you're sitting on an aircraft carrier at sea or something, and they call it Edinburgh. Matt Smith, thank you. He's laughing at me because he knows I'm telling the truth. Matt Smith, thank you so much. Little lift to the market here right now. The NASDAQ up 0.3%. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, John. With a growing list of lawmakers urging President Biden not to seek re-election, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says it's the president's decision to make. In an appearance today on MSNBC, she indicated he is beloved and has widespread support. Congresswoman Pelosi was asked during an MSNBC interview if she supports Biden leaving the race.
He's beloved, he is respected, and people want him to make that decision.
Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi tells MSNBC the NATO summit in Washington is a critical accomplishment for President Biden and says that we should give him some leeway this week. Donald Trump returned to the campaign trail last night with a rally in Miami. He repeatedly teased, but not officially announced, that Florida Senator Marco Rubio could be Trump's choice for running mate. Rubio spoke at the rally before Trump took the stage, questioning President Biden's health and claiming the White House is covering up the president's true condition.
The only conspiracy here are the people in the shadow government that are protecting and hiding from the American people the condition of our current president, and it puts our country in danger.
Florida Senator Marco Rubio. In the end, Donald Trump did not announce who his running mate would be, instead saying that he was officially challenging President Biden to another debate, this time without moderators. Rocked by Hurricane Beryl, southeast Texas is soaked and without electricity. Utility crews are working furiously to restore power to millions. At the Galveston County Emergency Management Center, Acting Governor Patrick says that he understands that without power, basic necessities are becoming a challenge.
It's tough not to be able to refrigerate anything and have food. It's tough not to even be able to go out and get food. We came in here today, and one of the things the judge told me, they have to cook their own food here. There's no place to get food.
At least 8 deaths have been reported in the U.S. because of Beryl. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, John.
Michael Barr, thank you so much. Paul, we got to talk about this. We're so hardwired in America where Wall Street, even if they're negative, have to be optimistic.
Yeah,
and that was just some British gloom descending on us.
It was.
I mean, that's a guy I think Ruffer could sell the triple leveraged all cash fund.
I think so. But Matt
difference.
Smith, our last guest, Matt Smith at Ruffer, really strong and well thought out call here on the bearish side of a lot of these risk asset plays out there. With a basic fundamental call that yes, the strength we've seen and the relative strength we've seen in the U.S. economy and risk on assets has really been driven by easy money, to put it frankly. And the stimulus and all that, and the continued borrowing. And when the U.S. government's the only one out there borrowing, that tells you something. However, unfortunately for them, as he suggested, that's not been the call here. That's not what the markets are reflecting. We got stock markets at all-time high, yields coming down. Will it end? And at what point will it end? And how will it end? So.
Now, we'll have to see on that. Let's remember in Washington, NATO meetings, Joe Matthew, Kayleigh Lyons, balance of power.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg News. With this Bloomberg Business Flash, the S&P 500 hit its 36th record this year. Yesterday, right now, we're on track for the 37th record. 8 of the 11 major industry groups in the index, they are higher, led by materials and information technology. Financials, the biggest drag that comes ahead of the bank earnings Friday as we start the next reporting season. You also have among the most active Tesla shares rising. They're set to extend gains for an 11th consecutive session. A Goldman Sachs analyst raising the target on the EV maker. 3M's chief financial officer stepping down, takes the same role in another company, further shaking up the industrial product maker's leadership after a CEO change earlier this year. Look at shares of 3M right now. They're up 0.4% into it, cutting 1,800 employees. CEO says the move not meant to cut costs. The company expects to rehire the same number, primarily in engineering, product, and its sales division. Oh, here's one for you. Analysts at Needham argue Alphabet's structure means it doesn't get enough credit for the different businesses, especially YouTube. They maintain the streaming unit, one of the world's most valuable media companies, and worth at least $455 billion, all on its own.
Laura Martin.
So if you, for comparison's sake, that's 50% above even the market cap of Netflix.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
that's Laura Martin. I'm going to tell you, one of the smartest analysts out there.
Yeah, she's
I've worked
been doing
with
it for
her.
years.
I've competed against her for a long time. Boy, she's smart.
This is a huge deal. Of course, Paul Sweeney and I don't have an opinion on this. Tucker has an opinion, but that's Tucker.
Yep.
But this is why we're doing YouTube, folks. We welcome all of you on YouTube worldwide. Humbled that we heard from any number of continents today. It is the future, and what's important, folks, is Paul and I don't know what the future is. We'll let Laura Martin tell us what that is, but it's YouTube. I'm on YouTube Premium at home. That's my own money I pay for, which is glorious. It's really glorious.
Okay.
And then there's YouTube TV, completely separate. We're on YouTube.
Yep.
And I'm humbled by how it's going so far. John Tucker, thanks for that. That was a really nice update there from Laura Martin. Lauren Hochfelder, when she was last on, stopped traffic. She's out of Yale. She's at Morgan Stanley. She's an institution on real estate. And it's the big, it's like Michael Mauboussin. It's the big picture real estate chat. But underneath it all is to try to figure out how much money we're going to lose. Lauren, where is the buy the dip winner right now in American real estate?
Gosh, well, first of all, thanks for having me back. It's great to be with you. I think the nice thing is that the dip seems to be affecting all real estate asset classes, all repriced almost across the board. But some of those are repriced for a reason, and some we think are actually really healthy, really great outlook.
Give me one of the healthy ones right now. I got to make some money this morning.
Well, let's start with industrial. There are really 3 reasons we love industrial. The first is let's look at the supply chain. We are rerouting and rerouting. Rerouting, changing where goods are manufactured, nearshoring, onshoring of goods, et cetera, and rerouting, changing how those goods get to the end consumer. And so all of that creates demand for industrial. The second is the continued rise in e-commerce, right? We all seem to be buying more and more of our goods online and demanding it faster and faster. That creates demand for industrial. And the third, really, which I think is underreported, is just this dramatic fall off in new construction. So when you feel like demand is really strong and supply is curtailed, that's a good sign for an asset.
One of the themes that's out there, Lauren, just investors in general, is an aging population. How do you play that in real estate?
Yeah, it is. This is really important because as people age, their needs for real estate change, right? And we know we have an aging population, and in particular, the growth in our population is coming from 2 cohorts. It's the millennials and it's the boomers. And let me tell you, when you look at housing needs, their needs are changing. The millennials, they're needing more space And the boomers, they're needing more services, more healthcare services in particular. So I'd say in the case of the millennials, there's a move towards single family rental. That's a great beneficiary of millennial demand. In the case of the boomers, we are really optimistic about senior housing because the number of seniors is up and the wealth held by those seniors is up, and light industrial supply down.
Lauren, the big service that the boomers are looking for is, can you find me a dog walker? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Lauren, there's a national housing crisis. Now, you tell me single family rentals are going to work. And as you well know, Blackstone has been a piñata where big evil institutions like Morgan Stanley and Blackstone are taking out single-family rentals. I mean, you're definitive on this. Respond to the idea that evil New York City institutions are buying up all the single-family home rentals, boosting the price of a rent.
Look, we think there's a better way to do it, and the way we execute is build to rent. So we are building new supply in purpose-built communities where residents get the benefits of multifamily, so they get highly amenitized community living, but the benefits of single family insofar as they're larger units. They get their four walls. And we're adding supply, so we're not competing with individuals looking to buy homes. I think we're helping the affordability crisis there.
So, Lauren, on office real estate, do we have a sense of where the market is in large urban markets in this country for office real estate? Have we had transactions that are actually setting the market price for us?
Yeah, so there's wide bifurcation here, right? And so there are certain type of office that I think will continue to really perform. The best of the best office, that which has the right characteristics to attract tenants, that which has the right, frankly, sustainability characteristics. We think that will continue to do well as we go ahead. And I'd say there's not been a lot of that trading, but we think that will continue to perform. And what I can tell you is that rents in some of those assets, even in markets like San Francisco, are above pre-COVID levels. Flip it to the other end of the spectrum, and there's office that simply shouldn't exist as office, and that's trading 70+% down because it needs to be converted to an alternative use.
Okay, and are we seeing some of these transactions in the B and C type office? Because I'm just thinking about New York City here, 3rd Avenue from 58th Street to 42nd Street. What's that market like?
Yeah, so you're starting to see some conversions of office to residential. I would warn that there are only certain types of buildings for which that works. Tends to be smaller floor plans or floor plates, tends to be buildings with more windows. There are a variety of different physical characteristics that make certain buildings better contenders than others. But we are in the very early innings of that. And part of that is similar to post 9/11, there is some private-public partnership.
Thanks so much. This has been great. Lauren, don't be a stranger. Love to have you into the office
they've
again
always
as well.
been, Tom.
Lauren Hochfelder.
Morgan Stanley seems like my entire career, Morgan Stanley, more than any other investment bank, has been a leader in investing in real estate.
Yeah,
good times and
it's
bad.
been a cottage industry
They've
for
been
them,
so
and it
good
goes
at it.
back. And there's some real distinctions here within the political debate that none of our kids have a housing future unless there's a trust fund, somebody's 6'5" blue eyes.
Right.
But the answer, I mean, John Tucker, you're living this as well. We're all living this. I mean,
I told him to
where
get
we
a
are, it's
hammer
been
and
blown
learn
up.
how to do some framing. Build your own. I mean, it's kind of what I did to, you buy the worst house on the block and then fix it up.
Yeah.
Or bulldoze it, is what some people. There's one out in Nantucket, I think. They said the house has fallen into the ocean. They got a bargain price.
That's an entirely different
for
issue.
that one. You doing Bitcoin in the 10 o'clock hour?
Sure, why not? Absolutely. I mean, the stock's down.
57,000.
Bitcoin's down below,
Right.
57,500, but it's all over the place.
A lot of people told Jimi Hendrix what to do. People don't know this. And then he got a hold of himself and did it himself. It's called Electric Ladyland with Eddie Kramer. Hendrix, good morning.
I can't get no relief.